Okay, Doug, way of introduction.
Well, as some of you may be aware of yesterday, Wendy put on quite a show.
You ready, Sakara? Excuse me, just a minute. Okay, we're on.
Okay, as some of you may be aware, Wendy put on quite a show yesterday. A lot of you got to watch a pretty good reconstruction of most of the body there. When I was earlier in the afternoon, I went over and John was over in the dining hall, and I just mentioned to him, hey, Wendy's having a lot of reconstruction going on. And the very first thing that John said was that Wendy was a person who was in perfect harmony with the law, that she's always willing for everyone else to receive the blessings first, and she's not putting herself first. She's putting everyone else on that same level, or even before herself. And as John said that, I thought back over the 3 or 4 months that I've known Wendy since we met in Auckland. And it seemed like every time she'd come to a seminar, there'd always be something that would happen to her. She'd always end up in front of class or in a healing crisis and melting down calcifications and having things go in the body. And I remember her telling me that it was like every time it happened, she'd always feel sort of like, well, it ought to be somebody else's turn. It ought to be somebody else's turn to have something happen. Why, let it be somebody else. And I just thought back on that, and I think that one of the reasons that she's having the kind of results that she has is that she's not looking for herself. She's just as happy when somebody else has the blessing as she would be when she has it herself. So, David?
Well, I don't know Wendy from the past, like Doug was telling you all about it, but I would certainly say that I felt that about Wendy, and that is very important. We're all part of a team, and somehow or other we channel that love and energy into one another. And nobody is ultimately any more important than anybody else. But in this particular session last night, it took a little while to get going, which is often the case, and I could feel everybody's desire to do whatever could be done. But when things did start to move, Wendy was very reluctant, which I think a lot of us are, to actually let things happen. We keep saying we want it to happen, and that's why we're here, but somehow or other it just doesn't seem to come together. But anyway, eventually things really did start to move, and it was a bit difficult because she was under the table and I was on the table, and Doug came along and helped, and things really started to move, and then Doug went, and things went up and down for a long while, including the rear portion of Wendy, quite involuntarily. And she went through a great deal, and so did all of the group that were supporting her, and I'm very grateful to be part of such a expansive space, and she knows more about it than I do. She worked very hard.
I think the best way to express what happened was I asked Wendy this morning how was she doing and how she felt after the party yesterday. And Wendy gave me a very brief explanation that perhaps she'd like to share with you.
I just said my bottom's not wobbling behind me anymore.
I love it. You all understand that? In other words, everything had firmed up and reconstructed in the gluteus maximus area.
My spine is very straight.
Speak louder.
My spine's very straight and firm, particularly down at the bottom. And my head actually feels different too. I noticed in meditation that it's looser. I thought I had a tight helmet all over my head, and that's loosened up. Probably the only thing I have to say is to get results with this, the more you align yourself with God, the greater the results are, I think. That's probably about it.
And Wendy, for those people who have who have had this happen already, like Anna Voss and so on, these are things that when these happen, you do go through that reconstruction. I might add, Heather, you wanted to talk about the snaps and pops on the back. Did you want to say something about that?
Well, I think Irmgard probably heard them before I did, because initially they were up around the cervical spine, and I could see Irmgard, I couldn't believe it, and crack. And then when the lumbar spine and sacral area started to move, the first crack, I thought my table had broken. And then, there were just subsequent little series of cracks all up the spine. And I watched her calves completely reconstruct, become beautifully rounded and firm. Great.
Now, this calf reconstruction is very commonplace now. The secret to it is holding the body perfectly still, and when the feet, the ankles begin to cramp, you continue to hold the body perfectly still and let the feet readjust themselves, and then finally it gets up to the calf muscle, and you'll watch the calf muscle completely reconstruct, like with Neville. Neville had that happen yesterday with an old injury that he had there, and everyone watched that muscle just move right into position. Is that correct, Neville? Yep. And so he's got a new pair of legs this morning. Wendy has a new pair of calf muscles this morning, but she hasn't really investigated the changes yet that have happened in the lower part of her body. And so that's yet to come. But the thing is that Heather was right there watching the calf muscles completely reconstruct as the cramping was going on and the burning was going on. And the whole body, I think, at one time was pretty well burning up, wasn't it? Up to the chin. I think that's just absolutely marvelous.
Just a couple of things to mention here. A lot of times, what I've noticed over the years is some of the best point-holding sessions you'll ever have are in days when you don't really feel like it. And Wendy happened to be sitting up in the front, and I happened to look at her as her name was called, and the expression was kind of like, not me today. So I usually look at that as kind of a good omen for a session, so I went over and shared that with her. And the other thing to note here is that she was having, she had 1 point held up on the neck, 2 points up on the neck on the vertebrae, and then David had a point about the mid thoracics there, and then Heather was down on the feet, and Wendy was aware of having a lot of problems down in the tailbone area. And there was some speculation on our part about, well, maybe we'll hold that. And I kind of said, well, we're probably going to get that next week anyways. And then I just sort of as an afterthought said, but you never know, maybe the whole spine will reconstruct anyways just if we get these points taken care of. And that seems to have been pretty well what happened there. Some of you may remember from last year's course that I have the job of tailbone inspector. And I take that responsibility very seriously, and I try to keep in practice throughout the year. So I'm usually pretty well aware of these things. Lewis, I think, is my understudy.
Doug takes these things very seriously, and when things are being done correctly, and the points are being held properly, it's very seriously. So one of the things that I noticed, that obviously there was a tremendous amount of reconstruction in the calf muscles and the legs and in the backside there. But what also happened was the entire spine changed, because we did actually feel up and down the. Did you feel the spine afterwards? Because there were just like buttons up and down. There were calcifications in practically every vertebrae up and down the entire spine. And as far as I can tell, that's pretty much 100% gone. And the really, really important point for all of us to understand here is, most of the body that reconstructed was never touched by a point.
I mean, she had a couple points held in the spine, but nobody went near the tailbone. Nobody was on the legs. You just had somebody in the feet, the neck, and the up between the shoulder blades. And the thing to realize is that I see a lot of people when they're working on the spine, they're in a hurry. They want to finish one vertebrae so they can go on to another and another and another and another. But the thing about it is if you do a really, really thorough, complete job on one point, you'll reconstruct the entire body. You don't need to mess around and go through 50 different points and be in a hurry. If you really are patient and do one thing perfectly, then all the other things are gonna fall into line. And this was obvious yesterday to the people around the table, where you heard all the snaps and cracks and pops and the whole spine reconstructing. And you felt this before and after. You felt the spine before and after, and it's totally different. It's a totally different backbone than it was.
Wendy, what else would you like to share? Okay, would you like to... Let's go back and take a look at things. Did you remember when you had that flood of violet flame? Do you want to talk about that? At the end. And this is very important. Got to bring that right up like this.
Okay. Well, I mostly was able to see what was going on while it was going on, which is helpful. And I think I probably would have still been going on if you hadn't sort of helped me to stop, probably. John just, everything was red and then black, and John just took me up through the colours of the spectrum to the violet, and then it all finished, really.
Would you please describe that? Where we started, and how, when you visualized in your mind what you saw, and then describe exactly what you passed through. Well,
as the process changes, the colours change, and I find when I'm starting something new, everything goes black initially. I can't see anything else but black. And then there's always a spot of red in the middle, and then the memory normally comes up, and I go through something else again. And I might see other colours, and I'll get a memory and emotion and so on. But this time John told me to try to keep my body completely still and not respond to the sort of electrical jolts I was getting. And my body got very, very hot, and he just took me up through the colours of the spectrum. So I saw first orange and then yellow, and as I went up through the colours, the energy started to sort of die away, and the heat went away. And when I got to the violet, it was just very peaceful and beautiful and calm, and everything stopped.
The point holding stopped. We started having pulsing on the points on the thyroid on the feet, and then the pulsing just stopped. Just went away after the violet was there in full blossom. Anything more you want to share? I'll probably think of something later. Okay. Rebecca?
She's going to make me ask questions.
So, considering you sleep up the top bunk, Wendy, what I noticed about Wendy is, and I don't know if there's anything about this in personology, but her eyes are wider through here, and I don't know anything about personology, but that's a lot more approachable to me. And also she had a bump on the top of her nose, and her nose has come straighter, and the bump has gone down onto the left-hand side.
You got some structural changes. She didn't look the same when she came out of the point holding. There's a lot of change physically there. Okay. Okay, are you ready now? Okay, we're on. Tom Staser has a few words that he'd like to share with you that he shared with me earlier today, but I thought it would be very appropriate that he were to share his ideas and thinking to the entire group?
I'm too melancholy to go through with this. What we were talking about, what he wants me to talk about, is emotions and feelings. And I tried to say that's the most hypocritical thing that I could talk about. But he thinks I should try. So.
And anybody who is a strong, macho man never gets melancholy.
Unless you're Scandinavian, and we kind of got the market on being melancholy, I think we started it. So that's the way it goes. We were talking about something else today, and so here goes. This is my opinions only, but I think it works through most Scandinavians. I will not talk about other people. When I say we, that's Scandinavians in general. When
That's
I say
French.
When I say me, that is the person in front of you. First off, everybody makes a lot of jokes, and we get along here, something like that, and everybody's got to take on a persona. And my persona has always been that I'm not affected by anything, and I'm not. And I'm very comfortable with that. And if people think they're going to make me break down and cry because I have to go through something, I don't have to do that. Some people may have to, but if you've made your peace with God or your spirit or whatever else, a lot of things you don't have to do. Other people you can read, and the older you get, the easier it is to read people. And that's what John and I were talking about. When we walk past certain people and something like reaches out and grabs you, and you can see that person holding something back. And a lot of times that happens on tables and point holding and everything. And you can go by and you can see people, and you can see it in their eyes, and you can see it in their chest, and you can see it the way they hold their body. When I am intentionally trying to pick up what is wrong with a person, you're not going to be able to hide it from me, and I think from John either. And the reason be, if you turn your head a certain way or something and I can catch your eye going a different way, that's going to tell me something's going on in your body. If your posture is different than the way it usually is, I'll pick that up also. And again, I believe this is with John. And I do believe that people who get a melancholy, which I think I've used it to the best of my ability for years as far as writing and everything else, I like it. Gets me stay away from people. So that's when you see the Scandinavians kind of going off by themselves or something. Basically, we kind of like it.
They get ate by wolves.
Wolfie? Where's Wolfie? You never hear people talking anything bad about the person's color of their eyes. When you hear them talking about brown eyes, you hear them described as, doe-like or soft brown eyes or something like that. When people talk about green eyes, it's the same thing, emerald green eyes, and the looks to an eye. But when they talk about blue eyes, what do they say? Ice blue eyes, cold blue eyes. They've always got this stuff because, but basically, this is from personal experience, when I was a little kid, and if my aunts or my cousins were yelling at me when I was about 2 years old, it always made them mad because they couldn't make me cry or something, because I would just look at them, and they'd always get mad at my mom and say, he just stares at you with those ice blue eyes. They always use that stuff against you. Scandinavians have ice blue eyes, I guess. Or they always compare them to the depths of an ocean, a fjord, something that is cold. And so we put up with that and we laugh about it. I think we're a minority. Personally, it doesn't bother me, but it does bother some people. And you can read people very easy that way. So if you're going to hold your emotions back, which is what John wanted me to talk about earlier, a lot of people can see it, and you're not going to get anywhere if you're on the table. If your breathing is going to be shallow, and you're going to hold things in your chest, it's very easy for a person to read that, whether they want to or not. And the older you get, the easier it becomes. Things that you blocked out and pushed away when you were in your teens or something, or maybe even in your 20s, when you start looking at people later on, when you have got your own self-confidence and you know where you want to go in life or something, it becomes very easy to read people. And you can misuse it, or you can use it. Now, a lot of people, and this is Scandinavians again in general, aren't known for being very outgoing as far as their inner emotions. Maybe that has to do with the fact that they come from what they say a land of fire and ice, and we're supposed to keep that inside of us. And I don't know about that. It's what, you want to add something? Please, I'm rambling. There is nothing wrong with being in control of yourself as long as you know what you're doing and as long as you're happy that way. But we have a tendency that, to give an example, when a relationship is over, anybody here that's Scandinavian, tell me how many times that you've known a relationship was over and you just stayed with it and let it go until the other person bailed. Excuse me? But that's the way a lot of us do, and I know I've been that same way too. Rather than going out and try to hurt somebody's feelings, what do? You just take it on yourself, and then you just wait until they finally deteriorate on their own and they leave you. We have a tendency to do that. We also have a tendency of being very outgoing as far as helping somebody, but never letting that person get to know us. Maybe that hits with somebody around here, but can't help that. Again, some of us like doing that. We put up a facade, and that facade is you are going to see whatever you individually want to see, but every person will have a different perspective of us. It's like I was told a long time ago, if you marry an Oriental woman, you'll never know if she ever loves you because you'll never, ever get to know her all the way. But I found out the same thing with Scandinavians. That same stuff. They get very melancholy on you. They'll hold things back, and then when they leave you, they'll say all types of things that they never said when they were with you. And you have to be ready to take that too. So if you're trying to get someplace in this, look inside yourself and see, are you holding things back? Are there things that you want to get out? Or are you comfortable the way you are? To give an example of myself, a lot of my students sit there and go, God, I want to be like you. And I look at them, I laugh. And a bunch of us were out one day, and this one guy turns around and he goes, you know, we've often wondered, what is it like to be you? And I looked around and I said, I think it's great. You know, I've got a lot of friends. I got all you guys right here. But then they said, yeah, but we don't know you. But because I've traveled and had motorcycles and sports cars and jeeps and material things, and they think it's really cool. And I said, look it, do the way I'm teaching you, but don't be like me, because you can't handle it. You cannot grow up the way I grew up and have the, how should I say it, lack of emotions and feelings which makes me feel quite well. That's the way I am. I live alone, and I like it. But a lot of people can't do that, and a lot of people are too young to do it. And when you're young and you're making mistakes, why would you want to be like a person who's older than you and has already been through all that stuff? You may think it's cool, but sooner or later you're going to get hurt somewhere along the line. Now, to kind of finish this off a little bit, we're talking about feelings and emotions, and then John tells me, oh, by the way, Sama's going to be holding your points today. And then he told me the points he's going to be holding, which is my pubic bone. I have not had a man that close to that region since about 3 days after I was born. And I think I probably didn't enjoy that either. So that's why I'm wearing my violet flame shirt and my virginal white, as much as I can get them, shorts. Actually, I told John that if anybody was going to hold my pubic bone points, I was hoping for, somebody wearing a skirt. But he said that Brooke and Ian were doing something else. So anyway, this was just about the ultimate hypocrisy to have a person like me up here talking of emotions and feelings, because they're not there, and I kind of like it that way. But you guys, I'm older than a lot of you guys. I'm older than a heck of a lot of you guys. And I know how I've lived my life, and I know the mistakes I've made, and I'm quite comfortable with it. You guys may get hurt, and you guys may make a lot more mistakes than you think. So when you have people here and you want to do point holding and go beyond, this is the time to do it. And for you people who don't, well, one of these Saturdays, let's go to town and go to a pub, and we'll get melancholy. We'll do it real good. Excuse me? What's that mean?
Now, Tom, would you be kind enough to just stand up in a chair here so everybody can see you?
Huh?
Stand up right here on that chair.
Are you going to hurt me?
If I can sit on it, you can stand on it. Okay? Now, y'all know that Tom's left leg is a little smaller than the right leg. Now, what we're going to do is, by the grace of God, if we can get into the suppressed emotion connected with this and get into the burning and the vibration of regeneration, with a little bit of help from all of you and the prayers for the highest and best good of not only Tom but all of us on an impartial basis, we will find oftentimes that in one point holding we get wonderful, wonderful results. Now, I'm not guaranteeing anything, but we're going to go for it. This is the day. Now,
I'm calm.
I want to state one thing for Tom to think about. The way we see the people out there is a
reflection
as to how we see ourselves. And oftentimes this
They're
is
all perfect.
something that we can all learn from, because if we're upset because somebody's doing something out there, it's because we haven't mastered that which is within us. And so I'm going to say this for Jonas and for some of the rest of you that have a little resistance problem. Jonas is young. I'm not setting him apart here or picking on him. But when you're 13 or 14, you're 14 now, Jonas? Okay, that's some people left home when they were 14, like Anita. Wasn't it 14 when you left home?
I'm not supposed to be telling all my deep, dark secrets.
Well,
I think we have some problems here. Up on the chair.
But the thing is, some people, because of their self-will and independence, are perfectly able to go out at the age of 14 and take care of themselves from that time on. But remember this, no matter how young we are, we haven't learned the lessons which give us that maturity that we really have to develop. Jonas, you understand, sir? And if you have a resistance within you where you're upset about something, which I've just kind of observed from a distance, I'm going to make this public because other people have observed it too. This is the best indication for you as a teaching tool, if you take it as a teaching tool and don't get offended over it. Okay, sir? It's the best lesson you can learn, to find out what upsets you and then go do it until you no longer get upset. It's like find out what you fear the most, like talking to people, something within general common sense, and go and straighten that out. Now, some of you are afraid to talk to other people. Now, pardon me for getting into your cases, but I'm going to point this out. And you sit back waiting to be spoken to first. Have you ever considered that the person that you think is being kind of haughty-taughty toward you, they're not talking to you, but remember, you're not talking to them. So which way does it flow?
That's Scandinavian.
Yeah. And now the thing to do is to find out the people that are kind of laid back and never say hello to anybody. We've got those here. You go and say hello and cheery hello, rub noses with them, Maori style, and just get them all frustrated, so they have to say something, But let them know that just because they're withdrawing from people doesn't mean you have to withdraw from people. Present company accepted, of course. But that's something I did want to say, because I know some people say, well, so-and-so doesn't like me because they never talk to me. I don't feel badly. Some of those people never talk to anybody.
They're just melancholy, or they're spinner.
Be careful. Be careful. But the thing is you'll see things out there which are projections of ourselves from in here. So if we don't like something out there and something upsets us out there, it's because we haven't learned to cope with it yet. Eonis, you got that, sir? I'm going to just take and dovetail in on you on that because you're big enough to handle it. If I picked on somebody else, they'd cry.
Can I finish on something else?
If you like to.
Since I had to go along with what he said, now you guys have to go along with what I wanted to say. Everybody here is supposedly being trained as a healer, and there are a lot of people that do healings here. And when we go out in the street, we're not going to be able to pick and choose who we heal and who we don't heal. We'll take people in, at least that way, or being just like medical doctors. I don't drink tea or coffee. I don't smoke cigarettes. I don't do drugs. Good. I don't use white sugar and probably a lot of other things. But I'm going to accept all those people that do, and I'll work with them. And I'll accept people that do drugs because I figure they need us. I'll work on people that drink and smoke because I figure that maybe they have an illness that needs to be worked on. I'll work on people that are vegetarians. I'll work on people that eat meat. I'll work on people that need to be helped. And I believe that what we're being taught with the white light and the violet flame is going to protect us. I believe that if I refuse to work on those people, doesn't that make me just like a doctor that refuses certain people? We're supposed to be above that. We're supposed to be non-judgmental. We're supposed to let people have their own free agency. So I'm going to work on anybody, even hypocrites. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom.
Now, what Tom has said is important on one hand. But on the other hand, what I have decided to do after working for years with people on drugs, people on alcohol, people on meat eating and so on, is I have decided to discern and work with people who want to go a little further than a patch-up job. See, now you're going to have to make a choice as to who you want to choose as somebody you can work with. Because I have spent in the States many, many years working with people who for the largest majority of them, they want to get themselves patched up so they can continue with the race for power and wealth. And their lives are all screwed up with power, seeking for recognition, seeking for admiration, and seeking for getting one up on the other guy, where the competition is keen and they want to be the best and they want to be first. I have no interest anymore in working with this type of person, because all they do is want a patch-up job so they can continue in their mad race to the involutionary spiral down into identification with matter. Now, what they eat, what they drink is their business, but they can do it somewhere else than in my office where I'm working with them. But you give me a person who has their heart set upon the things of God, and I'll go overboard to be of service to that person and help them out of their mess. But I know that if a person just wants a patch-up job, all I'm doing is a patch-up job and I have nothing to work with. And I'm not going to waste my time helping somebody who does not really want to help themselves and move toward a standard that would be acceptable to heal. Many people want a patch-up job to move their energy around so they feel good as they continue in the mad race for wealth and pleasure. I don't have any desire to work with those people, just so you know where I stand.
Something that John wrote to me one time in a letter, which I've always remembered, was the statement that most people are in a hurry to get better so they can get back to doing whatever made them sick in the first place. And I'll say that again. Most people are in a hurry to get better so they can return to whatever made them sick in the first place. I think the biblical expression is each dog will return to its own vomit. I believe that's basically the same principle. And I've I've looked at that principle a lot over the years, and I have to say, much to my chagrin, I've found it to be largely true. And I don't point the finger at anybody else more than I point it at myself in this area. I think we're all in the same boat here. None of us are perfect, and we all have made a lot of mistakes, and will probably all continue to make a fair amount of mistakes. I feel that there are many, many people out there who are very, very good at patching people up. There are many, many people out there that have certain skills where they're quite good at balancing people out and patching them up. And I think that's a wonderful thing. I'm very, very glad that there's people out there that are willing to balance people up and patch them up and keep them going.
So they can continue cheating everybody in business.
But I don't feel like that's the purpose of body electronics. I feel like body electronics is for the purpose of not just of regenerating the physical body, but of freeing the human mind. And as John always says, we're not dealing with the physical body here. We're dealing with the human mind. And the human mind is a much more difficult thing to subdue than the physical body will ever be. And I've watched, John over many, many years, and I've seen him and Anita really, really put themselves out for people and really, go far beyond the call of duty, let's say. And the thing about it is that if we're supposed to become or be godlike in every attribute, there are some universal principles here to consider. One of those is that God helps those who help themselves. God helps those who help themselves, and you'll find that there's a lot of people that don't really want to help themselves. There's a lot of people that they want somebody else to do it for them, but they're not really prepared to do all that much in their own behalf. And I think that
or they want to hang on to their attitudes so that when they go take a break on a weekend, they go down and have a great big T-bone steak or eat some alligator meat or something, while they're here, and fill themselves up with garbage, which takes quite a long time to get that meat back out of the system so the person can progress. You take on the nature of the animal that you consume. I've often wondered about fish. And fish is a little different type of meat, but it's not the red-blooded meat that's so hard to overcome, because the emotions of the animal are in the meat. And it's very difficult to overcome those emotions of the animal that you consume. All of this fits into this thing. I know of people hanging back and forth, on drinking alcohol, and they go out on the weekend and just to get themselves all boozed up, thinking that they can come back on Monday and they're going to be all right. It takes a week or two to get that alcohol out of the system. It's a drug. The same thing with cigarettes. It takes several months to get cigarettes out of the system. And so we want to get the cigarettes out of our system, don't we? And this is present company accepted, of course. Right, Bridget? We don't want to point out anybody in these areas. So I won't mention her name or anything. But I think a little recognition ought to go where recognition is due. And I think a little bit of alcohol consumption, I think recognition should go where recognition is due. Right, Anton? I'll nail him to the wall. Okay? Now, good, clean fun here, all right? But I'm quite serious. I know of people that are hanging back and forth. Well, I don't really believe you, John, on the firewalk, and I'll make up my own mind as to whether or not to continue on with the firewalk. I made a statement the other day, and I was dead serious. I'm not going to support any instructor who has any questions in their mind about continuing on with the firewalk. I've made that public, and I made that sits in concrete. Okay, so if you have a question about the firewalk and you ever go back to it, as far as I'm concerned, you have absolutely no status in body electronics, because you're destroying the human soul by allowing a person, by allowing your children, by encouraging other people to go through the fire. And I don't care how ignorant you are on it. You know, this is the type of thing I will not tolerate in my classes, and you don't get into any advanced classes beyond this. Unless you tell me, point blank, which some of you haven't, that you want to just put that behind you and then overcome any firewalk experience that you may have had. Is that clear? I don't want anybody wavering on the line saying, well, we'll put one over on John so we can say we've been there and done that. I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in quantity of people. I'm interested in quality of people that have the intention of serving God and being of service to their fellow man. That's what we're looking at. And we're going to have to put our individual debaucheries and degradations of our human frame behind us, because we want a clean tabernacle that the Spirit of God can dwell therein. I don't think I'm asking too much. Doug?
I would like to thank Tom for that beautiful laugh I had this morning. And I would also like to say that I think what you said is very admirable. But I feel on an energy level, when I'm going from table to table and just feeling the different energies of the tables, there's tremendous crystals breaking. And to be able to encompass that and to transmute the energies of the people around you is a tremendous job. And after a while, when you work in this field, it gets to the point where when you have people on drugs and alcohol and cigarettes, that's an added energy which is coming in, which is bringing in even more entities attached to the habits of the person. And I think you have to be so clear when you get to have a point holding group continually. You have to be so clear. You've got to do that violet flame. You've got to do the tube of white light so often, because you're walking through all these different energies constantly all day long. I remember in the Cook Islands we had this one man come to our house that was a drinker and a smoker, and we took him on because he really wanted to get through the stuff, and he really said to us that he really wanted to work at it and everything. But I remember for a whole week, I swear to God, the house was like dark. Like the bottom of an ashtray. Yeah, it was like the bottom of an ashtray. The house, the energy of the house was so bright, and when he would come in, the energy would just go just dark. And the one room we were holding the points in, I mean, there were some days I couldn't even go in there.
His ectoplasm would just splatter all over the walls and the ceiling and the floors, and you'd walk in there and just walk through the sticky ooze.
Yeah. And so I think I've also decided, along with John, that I would prefer to work with people that have committed to these higher principles and giving up the alcohol, cigarettes, and the drugs. And the meat eating.
I would like to just add something here. The thing about it is that if you're going to be in this type of field, the field of body electronics, there's no possible way to do it without exposing yourself to a lot of energies. You know, that's the price you pay anyways. I mean, we're all going to get exposed to all sorts of stuff, and perhaps in a lot of ways, one of the things that we're going to grow the most from is from being of service to others. And if you make that your commitment to be of service to others, you're going to have an awful lot of adversity to face. You're going to have an awful lot of energies come your way. So I don't have a problem with that. What I would just make the distinction between is something very, very simple. We don't care what people have done in the past. Everybody here, probably with very few exceptions, has done all sorts of things that they wish they hadn't done, whether it's drugs, whether it's firewalking, whether it's anything else. And, you know, I've certainly done things I wouldn't do again, and I very much doubt there's anybody here that would say otherwise. So I'm not concerned with what we've done in the past, but I am concerned with what we intend to keep doing. I am concerned with what we decide to do in the present and in the future, and without getting overly letter of the law about it, because I think no matter what rule you make, there's going to be pretty much no matter what rule you make, there's going to be an exception here and there. I think it's still important to have certain bottom lines that you work with, and I think that what you really have to look with is on a case by case basis. You have to look with how much is that person willing to do for themselves? How much are they willing to do to help uplift themselves? And to me, it's out of keeping with the economy of the heavens to burn yourself out helping somebody else that's not even bothering to help themselves. And I don't expect any of us to be perfect. I don't expect any of us to get it all at once. I understand that people are going to backslide here and there. I've certainly backslid in areas. So I think we should be quite tolerant of the mistakes that people are going to make, and yet still have a certain amount of rules, I guess. On a Saturday afternoon there, I was walking out of the dining hall, and I bumped into Anton, or I suppose it's probably the other way around. And it was quite obvious to me that Anton was had tied a pretty good one on, and Anton just sort of said something. It was obvious that he wanted to talk. It was very, very obvious to me that he wanted to talk, and he was able to phrase that more or less in, "So, Doug, you feel like having a good dark beer," which wasn't really what he really meant, but that was all right. And
that's the entryway.
That was the entryway, and just to give you a little bit of brief history myself, I didn't even have a beer for 10 years prior to about last February, and I was very, very rigid in that area, and I'm certainly still very rigid in a lot of other areas. But I just looked at the situation right there, and I realized on the one hand I could have chewed Anton out and gotten all mad at him and kicked him out of class for drinking, and all, there are lots of possibilities there. But what I saw was a person in need. I saw a person that was struggling in a lot of ways, and I saw a person that wanted to talk. So I went down back there behind the room and sat down with Anton and had a beer.
And got beer all over our table out front.
Yeah.
It took 2 days to get the smell out.
Yeah, but it was good beer. Cooper Stout. So the thing about it is that, and I don't, I probably wouldn't do it again. I mean, if Anton did the same thing next week.
And you didn't clean it up.
I was too busy scraping Anton off the wall when he fell. But I apologize. But the bottom line, I guess I want to say, is we have to have on the one hand some recognition of the fact that people need to be helping themselves to some extent before it's really appropriate for you to be helping them, because you're not going to get anywhere if they're not helping themselves. But on the other hand, you also acknowledge that people do make mistakes. They do slip and slide here and there, and sometimes we have to have a little bit of compassion. And I just say, whatever rules we have, don't get too caught up in the rules, and be willing to look at each individual before you, and be willing to be led by the Spirit of God to do what's needed for that person. And don't get too caught up in letter of the law. I think for now.
Okay.
What I'd like to add to that is we know that body electronics is about taking responsibility, and sometimes to take responsibility you've got to actually love yourself enough to take responsibility, and that's what we find sort of hard. That's the difficult one when you're on drugs and on alcohol or whatever you're into. So what I'd be inclined to do is maybe teach them meditation and ways of looking at themselves with a new perspective. And then when they're ready and feeling that love within themselves, they then are able to take responsibility and go for it.
Thank you. Nolene, I'd like you to come up here at this time, please. I want Nolene up here at this time. Now, this is exceedingly important knowledge that you need to have. And Nolene, are you willing to just share principles here that you have gone through from your experience?
I don't understand what you like.
Remember what you went through on the table? Okay, do you remember that? Okay, it's very, very important that everyone in this room understands this from an instructor's point of view, so that you know exactly what to do for people that when you come up against this situation. Now please listen carefully.
Are you meaning that when I went through what God was listening for?
We'll piece it together. We'll help you out.
I haven't started yet. I'm thinking. I suppose the biggest fear in my life is that I'm without God, and
Say it again, dear.
my biggest fear is being without God, and of course, this whole experience is heightening that.
Go back and hit that. Some people didn't hear you clearly. Speak real clearly into the mic.
Right. My biggest fear is being without God, and I got into a lot of fear. Not the night before last, because I knew I was going to be on the table the next day, and I felt I'd lost God, and that just seemed to be the worst thing that could happen to me. But that wasn't so. I don't know where to...
Bottom line, like a geometric proof, she'd hit a word pattern. And the word pattern would be like, I can't make it, or I'm not good enough. It started out with, I'm not good enough. Remember that?
Right.
And she went through, I'm just not good enough. And she went through a flood of memories when she felt that way, and just really got into it really, really good. And then it's just like a cloud is removed from that one. And then she went back into another word pattern. Remember what that was?
I'm not going to make it.
I'm not going to make it. And she kept saying, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make it. And she went through that one and the feeling of that. And she went through that very, very deeply. Very deeply. And then after that, we went into another word pattern.
Can't remember.
If going back and recreate the whole scenario, you're not hearing me.
Oh yes, I'm dying. Yes, you're not hearing me. I'm dying.
And then that went through that whole scenario, the word pattern, you're not hearing me, I'm dying. And this is the feeling that Nolene has had for years, just the feeling that she's dying inside. And that's just been a constant thing, a constant feeling that nobody hears me. Mama doesn't hear me. You're not hearing me. I'm dying. Now tell the rest of the story, dear, and let it all hang out. I want you all to hear this, because you're going to be confronted with things that you have to be patient and let them. You can't be fast. The thing not to use is neuro-linguistic programming. The thing is to take one word pattern, allow the next one to reveal itself through self-realization. You know what I mean? And then the next word pattern reveals itself through self-realization until you get down to the meat of it. Now, what did you go through? What did you see? What's the memories?
Right. It was quite... In point holding the other night, I had this feeling that I was very little. And then in point holding yesterday, I had this feeling that I was long, but I was also very little. And then John picked that, he asked me if I'd ever had a miscarriage. And I had, and it had, that feeling has been so, it's been just dragging me down, that like I knew if I didn't come here, like I just had to come here, because I know I just feel I wouldn't live another year. So that spirit was still with me, which just explains everything, that whole feeling. But it's also affected my whole spirituality, because it's like that I'm not going to make it either with God. That I can't quite voice that, but it was like, yeah, I'm never going to make it with anything. So the whole spirit was really just taking me over. It feels like.
And the feeling was?
You can't hear me. You're not hearing me. I'm dying.
And go for it again. Tell them how it felt.
How it felt. Well, I have been diagnosed with MS, and I'm much better than I was. But like, it's just that feeling has been just so immense at times. It's been excruciating in my body. It's been. I can only explain it as excruciating tiredness.
Now, where's the excruciating tightness now?
Tiredness.
Tiredness.
Mm.
Where's it now?
Where's it now? I do feel tired today, but it's not. I feel free. I feel tired because I did have a big day yesterday. But it's so validating, the experience. Like it's a release, the whole validation of the experience. I just feel the release of that.
The feeling of freedom. But do you feel like you're dying now?
No, I don't feel like I'm dying. No.
Now that's been gone, and that's been with her. Since what age?
It's been very definite since about 1962. That's when I first started getting, and that's what I was having a lot of yesterday, a lot of cramps in my body. In 1962 I started having cramps in my hand and my arms, and then I started having a lot of dizziness, and then they diagnosed it as chronic fatigue syndrome. Then later on things got worse and they diagnosed it as MS. But
But the little voice came out. You're not hearing me. You're not listening. You're not hearing me. I'm dying. And then this word pattern became part of her. You follow what I'm saying? An energy overlay during that moment of the death of the youngborn. Are you all hearing? Okay, so many women today are having not just one, not just two, but multiple abortions. Some have 14, 15 abortions. Now they come into you, you had better find out where they have been, what they've been doing. Because sometimes you have 14 or 15 little spirits there that are still tied into their energy field at a very deep level, causing all kinds of psychological derangements. And then you understand when you see these things coming out one at a time. You can see how the people have, for 30 some years are tied in with, you can't hear me, I'm dying. I'm dying. And just the feeling of the excruciating feeling, you get up in the morning and the feeling of dying is there and it doesn't leave. Is that correct, Nolene?
Absolutely.
And people think you're nuts because you feel so down, and they don't understand what's going on, and Nolene didn't understand what's going on. It's frustrating.
Terribly.
Yeah.
Terribly frustrating.
But she's had a smile on her face really ever since. And this is the thing that is really beautiful, because that if you feel inside of her chest and feel inside of her heart, that thing has lifted off and it's just completely gone. And that's just a wonderful thing. So this is where the chains of death are important for us to help a person relieve themselves of these chains of death and help to perform a service for those that are trapped in our bodies. Okay, so that they can go on about their business in the recycling process and continue on about their life.
Right. I'd just like to say something too. I've worked as a counsellor, psychotherapist for quite a few years. And the work that you'll be doing is greater than anything that's being done out there now, and the responsibility of it's wonderful, but it's also enormous. And I haven't known the half of it.
Just getting started. Nolene, thank you very, very much for your time, dear. Esther.
Just, I hope you can all notice the difference in Nolene's face.
What I actually want to say has already been said, but Tom made a statement up here, and I agree with him. As instructors, and I think what Mzee is trying to do here is to train out very special group of people in healing. Here, if we discriminate already here about who we're supposed to hold points on, that's okay, because we're supposed to have gone through a lot of things, and we're supposed to have made that commitment to come here and do the things we're doing. So we're supposed to have left a lot of things behind. And I would say, okay, you can say that here. But there's one statement that Mzee made, and that was discerning. To be able to find out among the people who will be coming to you who truly is ready to go on. And this is a little heavy for us in Africa. Because when the people have been so frustrated, we came out from our traditional medicines of a long time ago, which there are two types. You have the witchcraft and you have the real traditional doctors. And sometimes these two you cannot discern which is which. And some people are, each family has their own traditional or witch doctor, and they're so attached to them. So then when you come in and you're bringing in a new thing, these people will be coming to you because they did not get better there and they've heard of something new and they're coming over to you. If on that level you make a decision to say, well, have you been doing this and this and this and this? No, I cannot attend to you. Then you're already going to start failing the people. Nolene made a statement also that the work we are doing is incredibly beautiful, but it is enormous. We train here to go and do what has not been done before, and that is to try and change the norm, what is supposed to be the norm of things. And I just want us to, before the 6 week is over, to within ourselves go in and find out whether we are truly ready to take on that responsibility. So I think also what Mzee was trying to say about the firework is that he is not prepared to support somebody from these trainings who would be going out not certain of what it is about. And I think for the person who doesn't believe in what Mzee said about firework being okay, I seem to hear a cry for help, because the person has been brought here by their I am presence to get a real training. And if they come here and oppose the very thing that they came for, I see a conflict within themselves. And whoever the person is should really go out, think seriously about it. The first time when I was told that I was not supposed to join a particular group because I was black, it took me aback. But I sat down and I thought, what if they are right? What if it is true? What if truly, because I'm black, I'm not supposed to join it? So what? I had to take a good look of myself. And I thought, well, there's nothing wrong in being black, and there's nothing wrong in not joining a group. But there would be something very wrong in not going further with what I believe in, giving it the benefit of a doubt.
Here's something to think about. Mahatma Gandhi said, aren't you a Buddhist? When they asked him, he says, I'm Buddhist. No, pardon me, Hindu. I'm Hindu, I'm Muslim, I'm Jewish, and I'm Christian. This is what he said. I want you to think about this. If somebody calls you a white person, here is my memories. I'm white, I'm black, I'm red, and I'm yellow. And I have full memories of lifetimes where I have lived in a black body, in a white body, in Oriental bodies, and in Indian bodies. Okay? So what am I? I'm all of these things. And so when we take a look at Esther as a soul, and you go in there and take a look at her energy fields, you see white, you see black, you see Oriental, and you see brown. Is that clear? It's that simple. So she has a black body this lifetime. Hey.
I'm enjoying it.
But that's part of the game. We're all flowers in the garden. Sometimes we're a daisy, sometimes we're a rose. And they're both beautiful.
Thank you. I enjoy that. I mean, sometimes I get away with a lot of things just because I'm black.
Your body is black. This is the horse you're riding. You are not black. You're an immortal spirit that is without color, without race, without religion.
Yeah, what John just said now, when I was on the program, I mean,
Did you hear me?
I do.
Hold on, where's the glitch? Let go of the idea, I'm black. That's identification with the body. Look at the spirit. I am a sovereign, immortal spirit.
I got shocked on the table when I realized that I was a white in one northern country of Europe, and I kind of did not want to look into that. I think it was Radka who was facilitating, and I was saying, there's this cabin, and there's, what do you say? I said, whites. I mean, but he says, is that you? I said, and I kind of did not want to truly accept that, but she kind of pushed my buttons then, and it was rather weird to realize that, and seeing also some color change in us, I begin truly to realize that there is no color. We're just wearing different clothes, different times.
Thank you, Esther. Do you want to talk about spines?
No.
Never neglect an opportunity.
I was having, not really a ball of a time as such. Olivia could not let go with my pituitary gland, and who was the other lady then? I was burning, all right. Elizabeth was there, and all of a sudden, I mean, Elizabeth said, well, your point is flat, and everything was okay, and I was glad to get out of there. And John came and said, well, you have something with your spine and so on. And I thought, well, I didn't tell him anything about my spine. I only talked about my vertigos and so on, but not about my spine. And Elizabeth was there, and all of a sudden I had this, I first felt his finger. I said, yeah, there it is. But I did not. He said, are you ready for me? I said, yes, of course. I just thought it was a little crack here and a crack there. I was very comfortable, and boy, I felt this bulldozer coming right down my spine. And I never burned before. I never burned before. But there was a very strange, the pain was excruciating. Now, Doc, I don't know which is worse, that one or the cranial. This is the first time I've had any pains to compare with the triple axis of the cranial, and it was painful. Pardon? Yeah. Yeah, that was really painful. But a sadistic thing came up. After a while, it was painful, and I had this burning. He said, where is the burning? And I was like I was on total fire. And a thought came into my mind. If I placed plantains, which is a green bananas, you cook it, you do not eat it straight. I said, if you place plantains on my back, it would roast. That is how hot it was. But in the pain, something happened. I have not had this before. And there was such incredible joy. Just such enormous joy. He says, are you in pain? I said, no, but there's the pains, all right, but there's this joy in the pains. And I thought, am I being sadistic here? Am I enjoying the pains, or what's happening? That was rather confusing. And it was really beautiful.
And I pushed a little bit harder at that point of time.
Yeah, then he went lower, and he pushed deeper, and he went, and my whole pelvis was up on fire. And normally I have this here, And that is actually part of what makes an African woman beautiful. She has her hips pushed back, but now it's gone. You know, I mean, I had this dip here, and when I felt it, it was... Well, I'm wondering about that, actually. So now it's... now it's gone, so maybe I'll have to be using some extra things. Yes, even more because it's straighter. I mean, I feel myself straight. And today I was doing the Tai Chi and I felt a lot lighter and more flexibility in my hips.
Do you all understand that she had a very deep sway back, which we call an anterior displacement of the lumbar vertebrae? I went in there with my elbow. She burned, the whole body was burning for quite some time, maybe a half hour, wouldn't you say?
Oh, I was eternity.
But she was just burning from one end to the other.
Yeah.
And finally, you could feel the bone structures in the lower back move right up in position. The pain stopped, the burning stopped, everything went flat.
Well,
and now, if you check her spine out, there's no sway back there, and that the vertebrae in the lower lumbar are relatively straight.
You'll see it more when I put on my wrapper, because it is... Thanks.
By the way, there has been a request. After the example, hold on. I'm going to put you to the test here. There was a request to talk about scars.
No way.
No, but you can talk about it.
No. I have had 4 major operations, 3 on the same line and 1 across. The one across has a junction here, which was formed a keloid. Radka, you remember it? There's a keloid with a little hook. Like if I had to brush my hand here, I mean, you know, like you have your navel and it's dim, it goes inside. So the keloid was on this side like that. So you could almost, when I took a bath, I used to use an applicator to clean out from inside. The same like I don't have any navel. But now yesterday, the whole thing is soft and the place with the keloid has gone. That curve with the keloid has gone. Yeah. And the junction here, which was very heavy, it's very soft now. It's like there's nothing inside. It's just the skin. You can see the skin. And the line has definitely become thinner. It was quite a thick line going down. There was quite some change. But it was like having a baby. Like that. Thanks.
And she did go through that time with a cesarean. Once you poof these things, they're no longer there, you know.
Yeah.
Gone.
I forgot, yeah. Elizabeth got me into quite some things, and I cried yesterday on the table, and I've not done that before. And I had had a cesarean experience once, but I was kind of passing over it. But yesterday I felt the sutures being actually removed. So I went through the cesarean section yesterday, and the pains from the front and the back, when John pressed the lumbar vertebrae, then it was as if he was activating the suture. And when he said, see the scalpel go through it, oh, it was painful, all right. I don't know whether it was pain or it was burning. I cannot differentiate which was which. But
at that time you asked them, how does that suture?
That was really painful. I thought I've had pains, but like Mother Mary said at one time, that the experiences she and Jesus went through, she doesn't wish it on any other person. I wish there was a way that we could burn our crystals without going through those pains. Maybe John will come up with some ideas in a couple of years. But for now, I think we should enjoy the pains. It takes us through.
Thank you, Esther. Wendy.
2 in a row, huh?
Here, have a seat. Oh, thank you. I'd rather sit down. John mentioned yesterday that the electricity had only started coming through in the late 80s. And 88, was it? Yeah. And in Reiki in the last year, people have found, people on the table getting Reiki are getting a very ice-cold energy, and then the electricity starts to come through. And I just wondered if you could talk about the electricity.
When you read Book 2 and Book 3 very carefully, when you're coming up out of unconsciousness, where the Reiki energy comes in to stimulate the person to a higher state of vibration and health, you will go through this ice-cold endothermic reaction. And that will continue on from unconsciousness up to fear. Now, when you move from fear up to enthusiasm in a given area, and there are many given areas, you will then experience the exothermic reaction, where the body is like a red-hot burning stove. And so just kind of keep that in mind. Where Reiki is now coming into its own, where there has been so much morphogenetic resonance that people are now capable of getting into the recognition of their stuff. Now, I'd like to have Doug talk about Harold Sue. And I want you to know what Harold did on the table. Now, some of you move around. We've told people to unravel and to sometimes get into the positions of pain and so on. But I want Doug to tell you what he observed with his own eyes as what happened to Harold Sue.
Jim Geither, you remember Harold from over in Oahu? The stuff with all the closed lesions was before I got there, because that was in the instructor's courses. I saw the endothermic.
Pardon me?
With the closed lesions opening up, that was before I got there, because that was out of Kenai.
Yeah, that was at Kenai. So you didn't see that.
I didn't get there till the VNC. I saw the big endothermic, though.
Okay, Harold Sue, his eyes looked like a daisy. His iris of his eye was a brown eye, completely full of brown closed lesions. And it's from one side to the other, just in a complete circle. There was no space. Jim, you'll remember that, I believe. There was no space where there wasn't a closed lesion. Go ahead.
Yeah, I met Harold after they had opened up, so I didn't actually see it happen, but I saw Harold's eyes, because it happened in an instructor course about a month or so before Jim and I got out there for the VNC, but we certainly heard the story a lot of times from Harold and from others. And Harold, apparently in one of his point-holding sessions, Harold was a very stoic sort, wasn't exactly one to yell and scream much, and he apparently had a point-holding session where he just absolutely held his body totally still for several hours. And
having been fully trained in shiatsu,
he could handle a tremendous amount of pain, and he, as far as I heard, he probably didn't hardly say 2 words during the whole session.
Nothing.
And at the end of the session, when they looked at his eyes, he had started off with, as John said, there was no place anywhere in the autonomic nerve wreath in either eye where there weren't closed lesions. I mean, he probably had at least 20 in each eye, maybe more. Just everywhere he looked, closed lesion on top of closed lesion on top of closed lesion. And at the end of the point-holding session, you looked in his eyes, and every single one of his closed lesions in both eyes had opened up. Every single one. And now you saw his eyes afterwards as well. Is this accurate, Jim?
And what color was his eyes?
Kind of a green with some light brown in it. He was Chinese, by the way. He was from over in Oahu, and his tremendous, very, very light eyes, and just, I mean, we've seen over the years a number of people open up a closed lesion here or there, 2 or 3 sometimes, but he is the only individual I've ever heard of that's opened up, probably I'd say between the 2 eyes, at least maybe 40 closed lesions, maybe more.
But he breathed deep and breathed regular. And he didn't move one bit as he went through this excruciating pain. And then he went through this extreme endothermic reaction. And when he went through this endothermic reaction, it felt like a hunk of fish out of a freezer. And you can As Doug has heard other people say, there was frost on his body.
Yeah. The endothermic reaction was that I saw. There was a real good one that he had during the visualization and consciousness course that I'm sure Jim will remember. And he went through the endothermic reaction is when the body is, as John said, very, very cold. And Harold went through this endothermic reaction that probably lasted, I'd say, at least probably 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, 4 hours, if I recall correctly.
He was so cold that those of us who were maybe, 15, 20 feet away in the room could feel the cold. I mean, he was freezing the whole room, and this is in Maui in the spring. It's quite warm there.
80 degrees or more?
It's not a chilly place or anything. And he was literally like air conditioning the whole room. And the gentleman that was facilitating him that day, if you remember Mark Douglas, would you say it would be fair to say that Mark Douglas would not be prone to exaggeration? Quite the opposite, really. I mean, he was just a very keen observer, and he, in fact, if anybody in the class even did anything that he felt was even a slight exaggeration, he was all over him.
Now, Mark did not exaggerate, but he was married to his lady by the name of Marcia Moore, and the two of them wrote several textbooks on astrology. And Marcia was able to teleport her body at will. And this was part of the many teachings here of teleportation that Mark Douglas was aware of.
Harold was wearing a short sleeve shirt during the session, so you couldn't see his whole body, but you could see his arm. You could see his arms from here down. And according to most of the rest of us, didn't actually see this because we were all, doing exercises ourselves. We could just feel the cold from where we were. But Mark Douglas, who was right there, just a foot or two away, able to look at it, he told us all point blank that there was what appeared to be frost on Harold's arms, which is far and away the coldest endothermic reaction that I've ever heard about. And the thing that I remember too is that even by the end of the day, when it got to be time to break up the exercises, I remember that we actually had to go put Harold in the bathtub to warm him up because he was too he was still ice cold, and that's far and away the most extreme endothermic I've ever been around.
I would like to talk about a extreme exothermic reaction. When John gave up coffee in the Cook Islands, I think most of you have heard this story already, but he decided he was going to completely go off of coffee, cold turkey. Forever. And you've got to remember that he was drinking quite a bit of coffee.
I only had at least 15 cups of coffee a day. At least 15 cups. Now, when I was with friends, neighbors and whatnot, that the numbers would go up.
But anyway, he decided he's going to give it up. And in the Cook Islands, they don't use beds there. What they have is it's a straw mat on the floor, and then you just put a pad on it. So, pandanus mat.
That makes it exotic.
Okay, pandanus mat. It's like a straw. And then we put mats on it. So we put 2 mats for him and the pandanus on the floor. So he started to radiate this heat. This heat was coming out of his body so far that I couldn't even stay in the room with him anymore. I had to go sleep in the living room because the radiation was just extreme. I couldn't even be by him. And then he got up, this went on for 3 days, and every single, 4 days, every single bone in his body ached. Do you have any?
Everything was red hot, searing, burning pain. And I just laid there and panted. Everything was just in extreme pain. And there's nothing I can do but lay there and pant like a woman in labor.
And then
most of this has been sensitive leaf tea.
And then
most of it, not all.
He got up from the bed one morning, and I pulled up the 2 mats, and there was the pandanus straw pandanus mat on the floor, all frayed, completely burnt out where his body was. Powdered. Completely powdered. And I held it up and you can see his body shape. And on the floor is a violet outline of his body, right engraved into the floor.
Charred into the floor.
Charred into the floor. We still have that mat to show people. But it went right through the two foam mats, right into the floor.
We have other people who've done the same thing where we have trophies. Like people trying to hold points on top of grand pianos, where they're when they start radiating, they leave these beautiful wavy white marks down through that beautiful walnut finish, or on dining room tables that are walnut, where they've left the imprint of their heels or backbones or whatever they were working on down through that beautiful finish. And we had one table, I remember, in Wisconsin, where this one lady went through this burning, searing pain like I did, and charred the top of an institutional table down about a half an inch into the surface. Just charred it down in there, and it just, I looked at that and said, Now she went through a lot of changes at that point of time. Anything more, Anita?
No.
Did you eventually get used to the searing, burning pain and the radiation coming off?
Of you? Yes.
How many days later?
4 days later. This went on for 4 days. Yes.
Okay, since we're on the subject of extreme exothermic reactions, I don't think at this point we should go into a lot of detail because, truthfully, you won't even begin to understand it till you've read through books 2 and 3 a couple times over, and then you'll have to go through a lot of questions in a bit. So I don't want to go into a lot of the specifics at this point, but just consider that the endothermic and the exothermic reactions are triggered by the activity of the monopoles, which we talked about last week, and that ultimately the endo and exothermic reactions are very much related to the activity of the mental body. Now, consider that the law of love, or the principle of enthusiasm, is that force or power which transmutes the emotional body. And the law of light, or the use of the violet flame, is that force which transmutes the mental body. If you go back historically, there is a piece of linen that's known as the Shroud of Turin, that probably many of you are aware of, which shows the likeness of Jesus more or less burned into the shroud. Are most of you familiar with this? And apparently in this day and age, with the technology that's available and all, they've been able to show a number of things about it quite conclusively. Like, for example, there's pollen grains that would date to the exact time of the resurrection, the coins that would have been on the eyes, that would have been the Roman coins of that day. And most importantly, from computer analysis, and if you look at the way the shroud was wrapped around and all the rest, it's quite clear that the burn marks or the charred marks or whatever you want to call them, the impression that's left in the shroud, could only have taken place with a body wrapped up inside the shroud, and that it would have had to come from the inside out. These are all things that have been, this was known even 15, 20 years ago through the most elaborate technology that was available at that time. Now, this is an extreme exothermic reaction taking place, and if you go back historically, you'll consider that what happened to Jesus after he passed away on the cross. Where was his body? Okay, he was in a cave, which was the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, and according to what you'll read in a lot of the IM books, what actually happened in the cave is that Jesus spent 3 days using the violet flame. applying the law of light, and this was one of the major forces involved in the resurrection of the body there. And again, just consider some of the basic principles we're looking at here. The violet flame is the transmuting power in the mental body. The mental body, via the activity of the monopoles within the mitochondria of the cells, this is what triggers the endothermic and the exothermic reactions. So when you start to hear things like, John burning holes in mats and people burning holes in Formica tables, or you start to hear about people with, frost on their arms and all the rest, just consider that this has all happened before. There have been individuals down through history that have been able to do these sorts of things, and Jesus himself taught very, very plainly two principles among many. One thing he said was, "Be ye perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect." Be ye perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. And he also taught very plainly, "These things that I have done, ye too shall do, yea, even greater works." These things that I have done, ye too shall do, yea, even greater works. And so you look at what's happening on a more and more frequent basis in this day and age, and you start to understand that really what's happening is we're applying the same principles that have always been there, and getting results. The thing is, as more and more people adhere to truth, as more and more people apply a certain principle, it accelerates because you're changing the collective morphogenetic field, and things are happening nowadays on a much greater basis. I mean, I've certainly been to my share of seminars. Mag was just saying the other day. Do you want to share what you were saying about the reconstructions and the regenerations of the body?
Yeah, I was just noticing that there's been a lot of regeneration and a lot of reconstruction with people and their muscles, and you see the vibration, and you notice the muscles shifting. Terry had a really good example of that because he had a great view of Neville's calf muscle, and things were jumping around in there like jello. And you often get this, maybe one person at a seminar, but not to the extent that we've had it. Although I was talking to John this morning, and he said 13 years ago they had a seminar that was quite...
We've had this at different seminars in different places, each one associated with tremendous phenomena and events. Like in Kalamazoo, Michigan, I think it was 1983, we had a whole 110 gravestones tip over in the adjoining cemetery in a graveyard there, and each one of those would need a big Caterpillar tractor to tip over. They're big ones. And this all showed up on the front page of the newspaper there. Nobody knew what had happened. We had person after person after person, Maggie, go through different reconstructions of that with it sounded like the inside of an insane asylum, really, with the crying and the wailing and the entity involvement and so on. It was absolutely amazing.
You sure that wasn't long? It's coming in a second. Could everybody's attention, please? Ian has a question here.
Good morning, folks. I mentioned this to Doug from an experience I had last night watching a lady at another table, and he asked me to raise this in class. What happened last night was I was watching a lady hold a heart point, and she was really boiling, having a lot of trouble. Anyway, a couple of minutes later I looked over and she was off the point completely, standing up, and nothing was happening. And I asked her this morning, and I said, that was a funny situation last night. You were boiling, and then I looked across at you and you were standing up, nothing was happening. What happened? And to cut a long story short anyway, she was told that the person on the table wasn't feeling anything, so take a hand off the point. Come
on up to the mic.
Right. I asked you this morning at breakfast, I was talking generally, what do you do? What's the right procedure? Because I felt a bit unsure about it. And the STO point went cold. I was holding the heart point. It was really burning. And so the other person suggested that the other point was cold, and I'm a bit new at all this, and to go off it. So, but I asked you.
So what do you all think? So most of you think she should have stayed on the point. Why? Just because she was still burning? Is that the only reason? What about what happened on the other point?
If the other point was circling and was definitely sure that it was circling, then they should go off as we were told yesterday. But if the other point wasn't, or had just cooled off and was flat, and the other person on the heart was still burning, then she continues to stay on. She can only pull off if it was circling.
What does the cycling mean?
That she's gone off minerals and she couldn't go on anymore.
Everybody agree with that? Okay, what does it mean that the point went flat?
If the point goes completely flat and there was nothing happening, then it was done. And if she could press as hard and there was nothing anymore, then the point was done.
Everybody agree with that? Okay, so... Go ahead. I have a microphone if you have a question.
If the people who are holding you go flat, but if you don't go flat, if your experience... Hi, guys. If your experience is that it's not flat, is that flat?
On the points?
Yes.
What do you think?
I didn't get a question. Does it have to go both ways, where the point holders and the point holdee both feel flat on the point?
I think if you are holding point and it goes flat and you press and the person doesn't feel anything, then it's done.
Right. Both ways.
Yeah, I think it goes both ways. And sometimes I think if a person feels like, they go through a lot of experiences and suddenly they are calm, and then you press, you don't have any point, nothing happening, no tingling, nothing, and it is like you started in the beginning, and they don't have any response, and you also don't have any response, and it's done.
It would be incorrect, in my opinion, to say that the point... The pain can go out of the point, or maybe it doesn't go out of the point, but there can be an awful lot of pain somewhere else in the body. The actual point can be flat, which means you can stop pushing on the point. But the person, or certainly in my experience, I've lain there for an hour sometimes in terrible pain, and there's nobody touching me. As long as the point itself feels flat and the person isn't getting, as Esther said, extra pain when you push, it's flat. So it doesn't matter whether they're actually in pain generally or not. Does that confuse people even more? Or?
What I mean is, if there is no experiences, nothing burning, you press and there's nothing, and the person is not going through anything, then it's done. But if while you're still on the point and you say it's flat, and you ask the person, how do you feel? And they say, I'm feeling pains at such and such a thing, or I'm going through such and such an experience, you stay there with them.
Well, I would dispute that you need to stay there. That point can be flat, and they can continue bubbling away.
That's right, yes, you stay there with them.
You stay there, but you don't have to hold the point anymore.
You could just keep your hands there, but you don't need to. But yes, I would put my hands, I would still hold on the points. I wouldn't make a big fuss out of it, but I would stay on the point, because maybe deeper down something will still come up. If they're still going through an experience, I stay on the point.
That's true too, I suppose.
No, I'm just listening and learning.
So what about tie-ins?
What about tie-ins?
Okay, so if the 2 points are tied in with a degeneration line.
Yes.
And one person's points have gone flat, and the other person is still burning, do both people stay on?
What do you think? Okay. Thank you, Matthew.
What about when the person on the table can't feel anything anymore, and the person that's holding the point is still, so can feel something?
Well, I think it sounds like we stay on.
If you can still feel the person's hand on your foot and you can't feel anything coming out of your body, how can it be unconsciousness?
Yes, it can be, because you could be some resistance on the unconscious level which you are refusing to see. Yeah.
What if you think it's not, and you're the boss on the table?
Remember, reactive patterns, 95% and 100. If you refuse that it is not a reactive, then you are 100% reactive then. But I personally think, because it happens to me a lot of times, and that's just the time when I feel like getting off the table, and later on, something happens.
So when the person is still feeling something that's holding your point and you can't feel anything, is it the electricity coming out of the body? What is it?
I think so. It could be on a deeper level.
Thank you.
It could be other things. It could be heat, it could be numbness, it could be all sorts of things. I mean, it's quite possible for the point holder to feel tremendous amounts of sensation, and for the person on the table to feel nothing.
Yeah, what I find important and what I see happening is when the point is not finished at the end, that people start moving because they maybe like that it finished, and I can feel and see energy moving, and when you start moving around, you break some part of the energy of the healing. So even if it's uncomfortable, and it's not burning anymore, but the point is not finished, so keep the body completely still until it's really completely finished. Because things can come up and the energy is integrating, and it's there where the most healing happens. So, and I see a lot like people like scrubbing and getting up, and is it not finished? It's like it's laying still.
Are we done yet?
What? No, we're not done yet.
No, I meant the energy of the person on the table at the end of the session. Yeah. Are we done yet?
Are we done yet? Is it not like this and a little bit moving and a little bit pulling up this or pulling up that? It's like you break the energy, and so it's like just give yourself complete healing there.
Anybody else? Okay, Tarek?
I had my points held a few days ago. Hi, Tom. I guess he's waving at everybody. Hi, Anson. I had my points held a few days ago, and it was Tana and Janet, and I had a severe electrical shocks going through my body, and they really said try and hold the body still, which I tried, and eventually I succeeded. And the moment you really get it still, it's when the regeneration starts happening. That was at least my experience. My lower back started regenerating. We heard some snaps, and it was quite painful, but it was okay. I loved it. And I really would like to say this is the first time that I managed to keep my body still during electrical shocks or whatever, and it really could see the regeneration happening. Okay, that's it.
If you have your points held and they apparently go flat, and the next day or later you feel some numbness on that area where the point was held, does that mean the point's not finished?
It's possible that the point wasn't all the way flat. Has this happened to you from yesterday? Okay. Your situation yesterday was you were having a spinal where you had a couple points held with the elbows. Now, how many of you here have held points with elbows? How many of you have experienced burning, numbness, throbbing, electricity, and that sort of thing through your elbow, just as you would through your fingers? Okay. How many of you have experienced it with the same level of intensity and sensation, especially the throbbing and the numbness, through an elbow consistently as you do through a finger? Okay. How many of you have gotten way more sensation in fingers than elbows? Okay. So this is something to consider. A lot of people will not always get as much sensation in the elbow as they do in a finger. And it gets a little bit tricky sometimes because you can't always tell, or it's a little bit more difficult sometimes to know if you've really totally finished off a point with an elbow. Because if you never felt any burn, if the person with their elbow, now who was on you yesterday? Oh, Carolyn. Jan, did you have burning in the elbow? Did you ever get any burning or numbness or any sensation? Okay, did the numbness totally go away? Okay, what about Carol? A lot of pain. Yeah. The thing about it is you do the best you can. One thing that you can do that's often very, very, very helpful is when you hold points with an elbow, you can take your other fingers like this and place them lightly against the kind of the meat of your hand there, just like, you all see what I'm doing? And a lot of times you may not get all the sensations in the elbow. You may get the more intense ones, but you may not get all the very subtle sensations in the elbow. You'll find if you hold points enough with your elbow, you really will. You'll really be able to feel everything with your elbow, just like you can with your fingers. But in the meantime, something that's very, very helpful is to just kind of get your fingers just lightly touching them there, and you'll often find that you'll get the pulsing sensations and maybe some of the other sensations that you're not getting with the elbow. Bottom line, Ruth, you know, we do the best we can, and we hope it goes flat. If it hasn't gone flat, well, sometimes you have to go back and finish it. A healing crisis doesn't always end when the session's over. Sometimes the session just gets us into something, and so sometimes we are left in the middle of in the middle of something. Sometimes there is more to uncover there. See how you feel in another day, and maybe we'll have to finish those off again. Another situation that you'll often have in this is you may start on one point, and what happens? You move, you slide. So the thing about it is that what may have also happened is the point may have changed around a bit to where the point they ended up on got finished off, but perhaps they started off on a slightly different point and that wasn't finished. It's you know, for a lot of people, especially if they haven't used an elbow a lot, it's pretty easy to slide around. So you've got some other situations. How many of you here have found yourselves, much to your surprise, several inches away from the point you started on? Okay, so the thing is, it does happen even with the best of intentions, and even when we are paying attention, you often do move around. So there's other possibilities there, Ruth, as well.
I had a similar situation to Ruth. Not on this course. This was back in England, and I was having this wonderful point done here. And I went through a lot of fever and all sorts of things, and the point, as far as I'm aware, went flat. But for the whole of the next week, all of my scalp on this side was completely numb. I had no feeling. It was really strange. Any ideas what the reason?
Yeah, we had a similar thing happen last year. I've actually seen that happen twice, and what John's and I might add, in both cases, I was the one that plugged the people in on those points. What John's explained to me on that is that when you're dealing with the points that she's talking about are up on the skull here. They're actually what you're talking the supraorbitals, right? The principle is this: when you're working on any of the points on the head itself on a person, if the person has not had a complete cranial, if they haven't really had a very, very thorough cranial, especially including the triple axis, which is the part way up inside the mouth, then it's not a good idea to do any points holding on the head before that. And the reason is this: you run the risk of basically of having the person come up into a level of unconsciousness in a given area, and then not be able to get through it because there's still enough distortion in the skull. Is that clear to everybody? So basically, you don't really want to mess around with points on the skull unless the person's had at least one very, very thorough cranial, because you do run the risk of leaving them in a state of numbness. Did Ron ever get out of it? Ron got out of it by the end or not? Does anybody remember? Didn't Ron's feeling come back last year? How long did it take, though? Well, it was only a 4-week course, so it was a couple weeks, though, wasn't it, Linda? Yeah, it took a bit. We had a numbskull there on our hands for a while. Lewis will remember back in the States, this happened with another individual, and she had on her right side, she had the points held on both sides. She had no problem on the left, but on the right side, the point, they were just unable to finish it. It just kept going and going and going and going, and they were never able to really work through all the pain. And she ended up having like a big portion of her scalp that was numb. And I think the seminar was in about May, and she came out to Pennsylvania to do the cranial class in sometime in July. And she still had a numb scalp in a pretty big area. Not totally numb, but it was definitely, like it was half asleep. And she didn't get her feeling back until she had her cranial. And once she had the cranial, that all cleared up. So we got to be a little bit careful with this on the scalp, or on the skull rather. And I suspect that's what's has happened there. Now, how long did it stay that way, Elaine? Okay, you stayed that way about a week. And had you had a cranial before? Okay, so even with a cranial, you may have to be a little bit careful there. A lot of people have had cranials, but they really it hasn't necessarily been done thoroughly. There's a lot locked in there, and even if you have had one cranial that's pretty thorough, there's layers and layers and layers and layers of stuff in there, and most people will still get a tremendous amount of stuff out for cranial after cranial after cranial. There's a good bit of stuff locked in there for most people. So just because you had one cranial doesn't mean there's nothing else to do in that area. Well, you might. Okay, I'd like to spend some time this morning, Esther, answering Esther's questions.
I have. There's a question about point holding. I mean, sometimes you pluck on a point and you push as hard as you can, and the person doesn't feel anything. Yesterday, this thought came into my mind, and I'd like to have it clarified. Like, supposing you used some rounded whatever, well, maybe a wand or a wood or okay, like a little wood or something, an instrument or something, a wooden rounded smooth thing to help to apply pressure. What would be the effect?
It is possible to hold points with an object of some sort. The major disadvantage of that is that you have absolutely no way. In most cases, you don't really know what's going on in the point. You don't get the sensation, so you really have no idea if the point's done. Now there will be exceptions. John was down in West Virginia one time about 15 years ago, and there's this. I haven't met the gentleman, but I've met a lot of his family. There was this one great big guy, 300 pounds or more, solid, just solid, and he had some problems with his back, and John wanted to hold that point in the butt, in the cheek there on him, and John tried to hold it on this guy, started off with a thumb, and that was just a total joke. I mean, there's no way John could get in there. The guy had just, massive, very, very solid, buns there. And John tried with a thumb, and it was, totally useless. He tried with his elbow, and, obviously John's a big guy, and the elbow just, no way was it getting the job done. You just weren't getting any pain on the guy, and this was definitely the point that, needed to get held. John next tried a wooden spoon, and that didn't work any better. So they actually went out to the garden shed and got a crowbar, big long piece of metal, and John and the guy's mother planted the crowbar in an appropriate place, and they both leaned on it. And that did a wonderful job on the point. And they actually got all the burning and electricity and pulsing and all the other sensations. They could feel it in the crowbar, right through their hands. So I won't say you never use a foreign object, but most of the time you have some real disadvantages there because you're not going to feel what's going on in the point. You're not going to feel what's going on in the point through a crystal. You're not going to feel what's going on in the point through a block of wood. So you're not really going to know what's happening in a point. So I would say if you are consistently not getting enough pain in the body, what do you need to be thinking about? Maybe the STO hasn't been done properly. I mean, if you have a person where you just can't get pain in that person's, say their feet, maybe the STO needs to be done a few more times. Maybe you need to do some work. Maybe the spine needs to get worked on so you can get the nerve supply down to the feet. I mean, there's other things that you may have to do.
Just a point struck me when you were talking about the crowbar. Could it be because it was metal that they could get the electric shocks up, whereas if they'd been using, say, a broom handle, they wouldn't have got the same results?
I expect that that's the case. Yeah. Okay. Not just another question up here, or another point to be made. I would really strongly encourage all of you, especially those of you that haven't gone through the complete cycle of points all the way up through and including cranial. I would encourage all of you to really keep a good flow sheet. Keep accurate record of what points you've had held in the past. This is, it really doesn't take a whole lot of effort. You just need a notebook or a few pieces of paper. We're finding that there's a lot of people here that don't have any records of what's been held, and the thing about it is that if we're trying to help you, for example, if you're one of those 19 people we have on the list who haven't had burning in the body yet, it's we need to be able to look at that flow sheet and say, well, let's see, they've had the hypothalamus held 5 times or whatever, so it's probably not that. They've had the medulla held, a couple times. Oh, but look, they've never had the gonads held, or you never had the, you never had the pituitary held. It cycled the one time and you never got back to it. So the thing about it is that your flow sheet is going to be a very, very important thing, and I hope you're all keeping one. If you're not, I really hope you'll start, because we're finding here that there's some people that don't even remember what points they had held 2 days ago. And if that's the case, it makes our job a lot tougher. It makes everybody's job a lot tougher in trying to figure out what to do for a person, because we're kind of shooting in the dark there. So I hope you'll really, for your own sake, I hope you'll keep good records of what you've had done.
Has anybody got perhaps two typed flow sheets that they don't need?
Are there any other questions before we get into the points? Okay. Are you feeling in stuntman mode this morning, Jim? Okay, Jim, why don't you be our guinea pig here? Oh, sorry, you're engaged there. I forgot. We'll get somebody else. Tarek, are you volunteering there? Yeah, sure. Okay. Why don't you come on up on the table there? You might all want to get out your some of your charts here, especially your foot chart, because we're going to start. Don't have them. Oh, they're being photocopied. I don't really need it, but. Off of that. Okay, what I would encourage all of you to do here is this. We're going to demonstrate these points on Tarek, and My apologies that we don't have the foot charts back yet, but what I would encourage you to do is make little drawings if you can, but recognizing that you're going to have the foot chart anyways, what you might want to do in these points is take some very, very careful notes on things like the angle you're going to press it, a good hand position to hold it, that sort of thing, so that you can really get a good description and a good feel for how to hold these points. Now, what we're going to start off with, how many people here don't have a foot chart of any sort? Okay. Yeah. Okay. No. Let's see who else we can get here. Is Peter Brotherton here? Okay. Hey, Linda, would you like to be our point finder here? Okay, there's some extra charts there. Okay, if anybody needs a chart, try to get one back there from Allison. There's only a few. Okay. Corey, are you here, Corey? Okay, why don't you guys come on up and you can play good cop, bad cop here with Tarek. We're going to start with the top of the endocrine system. What will be the master gland on the endocrine system? Okay, where is the pineal going to be on the foot there? Why don't we get... feedback if it's way up there, Neville? Okay.
Come on here, foot shot.
You want me to chart right there?
Mine, yeah. Oh, we got one here. Got one here. No, I mean, no, mate.
What I think might be good on this, Sakara, is at some point also to zoom in and so you get a good shot of the foot chart on the tape as well. Okay, the first one we're going to find here is the pineal. Now, those of you that have the chart, you'll notice that you have 3 points that are basically in line with each other, which are going to be what? Okay, the pineal, the pituitary, and the hypothalamus. Now, if you imagine the way Tarek's lying here with his toes sticking up, if you imagine taking like a ring and sliding it down over his toe like this, coming straight down over his toe, you'll find that the ring will basically pass over the pituitary, pineal, and hypothalamus at roughly the same time. They're all at about the same distance along the toe there, which I think you can see from the chart. Okay? Now, what you want to look for, you want to find the knuckle on the side of the toe. Okay? Corey and Linda are getting the knuckle on the side of the toe. Now, where are these points going to be in relationship to the knuckle? Are they going to be closer to the foot or closer to the tip? Okay, where are they in relation to the knuckle? Okay, they're going to be just a little ways closer to the tip. Just barely. Really next to the knuckle, but just, on the side towards the tip of the toe. Okay, so that's basically your length along the toe. Okay, find it on your own foot. You find the knuckle on the inside of your show them what I mean there, Linda. Show everybody the knuckle on his toe there.
This knuckle here.
Where it bends.
Where it bends.
Okay.
It's more to the nail, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, now when you're looking for the pineal, where is it going to be on the toe? Okay, it's going to be on the bottom of the toe. Where on the bottom? Okay, towards the first toe, so it's going to be in the bottom, but over near the edge. Okay? It's going to be on the bottom, over near the edge. What's going to be the proper angle on this one? Okay, now did you all hear that? Okay, what you need to do on this, what's the angle you're getting on that one, Corey? Yeah, use the mic.
You go straight in and then up towards the top of the toe.
Okay, so you pull up. Now, Tarek, is that to your satisfaction? Okay. So, now, Corey, I want to hear it in your words. It's good to hear it in different descriptions here. Tell people exactly how you're getting this.
Usually it's easiest to hold it from down at the end of the body, and you just go straight in at an angle towards the middle of the toe and up towards the top. And best to hold it with your thumb, you get more pressure that way.
Okay, Linda?
Or otherwise, if you have a very strong finger, you can come in like that. You can come in from behind, from the other side of the foot and pull up like that. And they'll tell you whether you're on or not.
Okay, a couple of things here I might add. There's more than one correct way to hold a point in the sense of your hand position. You have to do what's going to work well for you. But the thing to realize is getting on a point properly, it's going to be more than just getting on the spot. It's going to be getting what else as well? The right angle. The correct angle is going to be very, very important. Question? Oh, and obviously getting a good, yes, thank you, getting a good amount of pressure on it. Now, me personally, I prefer to do it, this particular point, I prefer doing it the way Linda has shown, which is with the index finger, where I would come around, show that hand position again, Linda. For me personally, this works a lot better, but you'll find for some people, they may not be able to get enough pressure with an index finger there, and they may need to use the thumb. The drawback of this position might simply be that you might not get enough pressure. The drawback of the thumb position, in my opinion anyways, is that although you can get a lot of pressure, to get the right angle, you're tending to place either your wrist or your elbow at a very, very odd position, which I find very, very difficult to maintain for hours and hours. So the thing about it is you got to do it the way that works for you. I'm not making one right and one wrong here, but you definitely want to make certain that you can get a good amount of pressure and the right angle and the right location, and that you're going to be able to maintain that, not just for 10 minutes, but for possibly 4 or 5 hours. Now, how do you know when you have the point, Mag?
Well, the point holder will scream, maybe. You got to communicate with the person who's on the table to see if you've got it. But I just want to point out that finding a point is not strictly a mechanical thing. I mean, you can look at a foot chart and you can get relatively the right area, and you can get the positioning and the angle. But yes. Hi, Tom. But it has to be a very intuitive thing as well. And so we need to develop our intuitive abilities in finding the points. I mean, you will notice that, some people will go up and they'll just go right in because they can almost see it. And the first step to doing that is to take those word patterns of I don't know where the point is and I can't do it and I can't find it, and to consider the other side, which is that you do know. Be still and know that ye are God, and assume the virtue, and to to ask for guidance and help in finding the point, and then allowing that to be. So we just need to develop our intuitive abilities as well as learning this mechanical aspect of it.
How much difference does it make a very small change in pressure or location or direction?
Well, it can make a big difference in the session. Just a slight switch on the angle, which could have been something that you intuitively saw to do, can make all the difference in how much pain the person is receiving and how much they're able to get into and dissolve. So.
Corey?
Well, as we hear John say all the time, we'll have plenty of different anatomical changes with people, and so the angle and the angle changes quite a lot with people. I think the most important thing to find is the most comfortable position for you, because you've got to hold it steady. Too many people say, well, I'll do it this way, and then they can't hold it steady for the whole time, and so they're moving and jiggling around trying to keep steady, and the person just doesn't get into the pain that way. It changes too often for them to really get into it. So I think as long as it's steady and you're getting a decent amount of pain out of it, then you're right.
Will a point still burn even though you're not quite on it and you're not quite at the right angle?
It certainly will.
It'll burn and burn and burn. But will the person get out of the session what they could have?
Not if you're getting maximum pain out of them. If you find the place that gets the maximum pain, then you'll get the best results.
In case you haven't figured it out by now, we're into pain here. And the thing about it is I notice a lot of people on a point here, they seem very, very willing to settle for something that's okay. In other words, oh yeah, that's about right. And I notice that a lot of the point holders are somewhat haphazard in their approach to holding points, in that they feel pretty comfortable as long as they got in approximately the right place. And a lot of the people on the table don't seem to really be speaking up and letting people know that it's not right. It's not right on the point. And really, individually and collectively, we need to take a little bit more responsibility here. Because, I've found that we're walking around the room here, and we're going to table after table after table and finding out that probably 3/4 of the points really aren't on all right. I can walk through 10, 15 tables in a row, and at least half the points are not really hurting the person there. They're not getting pain out of the point, either because there's not enough pressure, or because they're not in the right spot, or because they're not in the right angle. And I'm happy to do that. Mag's happy to do that. We're happy to walk around and do that on the one hand. But the thing about it is that we're not always going to be there. You guys are going to have to be out there holding points and teaching others to hold points. And we need to really get into good habits right here and now, and don't settle for second best. I come over to a table and look for a point. If I can't find pain in the person, I take that as a personal challenge. Believe me. I want to make sure we're getting a good spot there. Okay, Linda. Oh, Brendan, you got a question? Come on up to the mic.
Hi Tom, hi Anton. Okay, if people are having trouble finding the points, there's plenty of reflexology courses around, and they specialise in those points on the foots, and you can get some hands-on practice at getting into them. It's easy. Thank you.
Linda? Okay, so the thing about it is be picky, and recognize too, yes, on the one hand we've got the foot chart to work with, which is a map that gets us into about the right area. On the other hand, as Corey has pointed out quite accurately, there's a tremendous amount of anatomical variation from one person to the next. The point's not going to be in the exact same place in everybody. The angle's not going to be the exact same in everybody. It's going to vary. And as Mag has pointed out quite accurately as well, we also have to learn to really develop the intuitional side to where we can hone right in on the point. Of course, there's another factor, which it's so obvious that I think people miss it a lot of times. We're not holding points on a corpse. We're holding points on somebody that can give us feedback. Aren't most of you finding, when it really comes down to it, that when somebody's finding a point on you and they're pretty close? Let me ask you this question. When somebody's on your point, or shall we say almost on your point but not quite, how many of you are finding that you really just know that they don't quite have it? How many of you are finding that? Pretty much all of you. Okay. How many of you, when they're not quite on it, have a pretty good idea which direction they ought to go? Like they should go to the left or the right or up or down? Okay, not as many of you. So we need to work on the intuitive side from both angles, both the person holding points as well as the person on the table. But how many of you know when the point's really right? How many of you know it for sure? How many don't know it? Okay, so that's the thing. We've got a lot of different things we can work with, and if we integrate all of these, this shouldn't be difficult. Donna?
I had one point the other day that didn't...
I had one point the other day that no matter what we did, it just couldn't get to stay on it. And I was wondering, I know that there's sometimes you just get tired of trying to get the person on the point, and I just used it in my point session and it worked really nice. But the other thing that I was wondering is, could there be either an entity or some really strong resistance in the person to having that point held, and that's what's fighting the person being on that point?
Yes. Well, yes, as the crystal dissolves, it begins to manifest in the outer world the very thing that will perpetuate that crystal. So if it has to do with to keep it in constant perpetuation, so it's not going to want, the crystal itself or the pattern is not going to want you to stay on that point. So it's just going to take a real concerted effort by the point holder and by the person on the table, because they need to be holding still and concentrating and looking at the patterns as they're coming up. Because if they're having a pattern that they want the person to let go, or they're not doing it right, and they're buying into that pattern, my point holder's not doing it right. He's not doing it right. It's not good enough. And he's not, and the person on the table is not looking at the other side of that, is not trying to intensify the resistance and intensify the pattern, then they're just perpetuating their very own crystal.
How many people here have a resistance to other people not doing it right? Well, I think the rest of you are liars, frankly. Janine, you've got a good little story here.
When I was doing the instructor course in Pennsylvania, I was about 1 hour on the table resisting one of my point holders. The other one was Louis. Louis, and he was on my heart point. So the other was Trini. Yeah. So what? No names. Okay. So he was holding my thyroid point, and I really wanted to go for it. It was my third session. And he was holding it like a butterfly was sitting on it. So the 2 sessions before, I had like that good pressure. I like that good pressure because you go deeper and quicker in memories and crystals burning off. So he was sitting there, and I was like thinking to myself, he's not pushing enough. I'm getting pissed off with him. But I was like concerned not to hurt him, so I didn't say anything. But I was asking Doc, he's not pressing enough, just is not pressing enough. Okay, when did you felt this way before? When did you felt something? Didn't say anything. I couldn't feel anything. I was just keep resisting that I had him on my feet. So after 1 hour, the point was finished. I went in another cycle, of course, because he did it good. He didn't press. So I kept going outside of myself. And Doc always told me, get inside. And I did that, but it was a hard time. So Doc put his fingers again on my pubic points, but not one finger on one side, but like this. And you know how hard it is to press with one thumb. So the butterfly came from my feet to my pubic point. And I felt less. I didn't felt any pressure. So there I was going again, like really like getting more pissed off, So I'm not going to have a good session. I'm not going to have a good session. And I kept calling Doc because I didn't trust my point holders anymore, They were off. And Louis was constantly talking to me, and I was like getting on him too. So that went on. And at a certain point, I think it was the third or the fourth time that Doc came by, and he didn't want to stay there with me, so he just walked off. He just was saying, just get inside, And then at a certain moment, so the energy was like really intense, I was really pissed. And so suddenly I went in the memory, and I went in thought patterns like, I want to be touched. So just, I want to be touched, I want to be touched. So even, even when you feel that resistance towards the point holders, just take it again inside and ask yourself, why are you angry? Why are you pissed off? Because it brings something up. It took me 1 hour, but I had the memory there, I want to be touched, and it was by my father, because my father had misused children. He didn't do that with me, but there was that energy, like touching, his sex, like, and he didn't want to give that to me. And I made a decision there, if he's not going to give this to me, I'm going to get it somewhere else. And from that moment on, I kept attracting sexual abuse. So I was glad, like, it's the resistance that you have towards your point holders is always a reflection of a crystal, what's inside of you. So this week, the universe served up a new resistance there for me, because I had Anton on my points. Anton, thank you very much. And what? No pubic points, no, my heart point. And I had that resistance of, oh no, I don't want this, because I had memories, because my ex was drinking, so something happened in the weekend with you, and I had that resistance, like, no, I don't want this. And so there I was going again. But it changed, it's changed quickly, because I decided, okay, I'm not going to resist this. I'm going to use this for my benefit, because it's not a coincidence which point holders you have on you. If you have people who like all over the body, it's like sliding, it's not okay to slide off the point, but still, you can use that. So I've been using that again, and it shifted. I didn't went in a memory, and what happened for me was that I really felt more and more love towards people, but especially towards men. It didn't irritate me anymore. It's like, it was okay. It was okay that he was being impatient and saying, oh, is this not finished at the end, it should be done for a long time. I felt like the change in me with accepting first my resistance. I always cried almost before I was on the table, because I felt, really, I don't want this. So, but I'm thankful I had you on my points, so, because it was an expansion again for myself, that I could get over it. And what I've been feeling out of that is that I don't need to be angry because some people doing different things or saying things that I don't like. I just can be firm, and I learned this out of it. Instead of being resisting, just like accepting it and integrating it. And then I had quite some fun when they both were, Kevin and Anton, were on their knees, because they had so much pain. But it was not a cruel, it was not like, now it's the man, now it's the man that go through their knees, because I was always the one in pain and suffering and being hurt and being kicked around. So it was now, I could enjoy, and I just want to say, to the man also, it's okay, it's okay to feel the pain, and even when you resisted it, Anton, it's okay, you showed it, and you show in that way also the soft side that's inside, because I didn't just saw the resistance and the pain there, and the not want to hold, I saw the other side, and I think that's when you stop the resistance. Just first accept the resistance towards the resistance, but then you really see the beauty in it. So I think I took it a step further. No, I just was in bliss. I just was in enthusiasm. I was a lot in pain and going through these electric shocks and all that, but it's like the men were there with me suffering too,
How many of you have a resistance to not doing it right yourself? how many of you resist not doing a good job? That's what I mean. How many of you have a resistance to not doing it right yourself? So if you look at the two things where many, many people here have a resistance to other people not doing a good job. So let's say we got a person on the table who resists other people not doing a good job, and we get a point holder who resists not doing a good job, and in particular resists having other people tell them they're not doing a good job. You got yourself a nice little situation there, don't you? First set of seminars I was at, and there was this one woman there, and I happened to be at the next table to where she was getting her points held the first time. And she was just chewing out her point holders for the entire 3 hours. I mean, she was just absolutely tearing them apart. She had these two old ladies down at her feet who were mostly deaf and had their back to her, so they couldn't really hear her anyways. And they most of the time were absolutely clueless as to whether, they were like, I mean, we're not talking being off a point by an inch or so. I mean, they were like, we were lucky if they were still on the same leg they started out on. I mean, they're just all over the place. And she was just so upset about this. I mean, she just was chewing everybody out, and it just went on and on and on. And I remember just kind of sitting there just watching the whole thing. And, I mean, obviously reality was what reality was, in the sense that she really did have point holders that were doing an absolutely wretched job. I mean, they were nowhere near the points. They were half falling asleep. They were, I mean, clearly she, on the one hand, you could see that she was very justified in feeling the way she felt. But what I noticed, oddly enough, was the next time she had her points held, she had a couple of the point holders that were probably like, two of the best point holders in the whole seminar. People with like heaps of experience, very, very strong hands, really, really attentive. I mean, people that in the past had probably never slipped on a point. People that were just like laser-like precision, just right on a point. And I happened once again to be near that table as this was happening. And the thing that was really interesting was the exact same thing happened. And these are people that never slide on points, and they couldn't stay in the points. And I was sitting where I could see the faces of the point holders, and these two men were absolutely baffled by what was going on. They'd never, ever, ever had anybody complain about the way they held points before. They'd never slid off a point before. They'd never had the slightest difficulty getting exactly on a point and staying on a point. And they were really trying. I mean, they were absolutely trying as hard as they could. And it was like, it was like trying to hold on to a greased pig. I mean, you just couldn't do it. So the thing to realize is, as Donna's pointed out and as Janine has pointed out, and as Magus mentioned earlier, it's like when your crystals are releasing that information, the universe is going to manifest it around you anyways. And whether that's in the form of a point holder who really isn't doing a good job, or in the form of a point holder who typically never does do a good job, which, the person that Janine's mentioned here, in my experience, either couldn't or wouldn't apply firm pressure to a point. No matter how many times people asked him, they're just, he either couldn't or wouldn't press any harder on a point. But the thing about it is even if you don't get somebody like that to reflect your resistances, if your resistances are intense enough, you'll turn a perfectly good point holder into somebody that can't hold a point worth a damn, at least for that session, because that's what you need to experience. So the bottom line is, on the one hand, be particular about your points. Demand that they be held properly. I mean, say, look, that doesn't seem like enough pressure, or that's too much pressure, or you're not quite on the point. I mean, on the one hand, be very, very firm and ask for what you want. But on the other hand, recognize that if you're still not getting it, that there's reasons. And that the reasons you have to start looking at after a while are not going to be outside yourself. The reasons are going to be right inside yourself. And that's really the most appropriate place for any of us to look.
Yeah, I was just going to give an example. Doug held some points on the palate of my mouth after I had a cranial, which we'll learn about next week. Okay, I don't know how many times he had done that and how many times he had actually taught a cranial class, but he went in there in the back of my palate, and he was just not on the right point. I mean, I said, that it feels like I'm choking. You're not on the right point. He says, I'm on the right point. I said, there's no way that you are on the right point. I don't care how many times you've done this, you're making a mistake, you're not on the right point, okay? He said, listen, this is where it is, this is the point, put your finger in the mouth, check it out. And I said, I feel like I'm choking, I'm gagging, you cannot be on the right point. Well, I don't know who's more stubborn, but I finally decided, all right, he thinks he's on the right point, I'll just go with it and I'll show him he's not on the right point. But I decided to just go with it and intensify that feeling like I was being choked. Because he wasn't on the right point, of course. But what happened is that I actually went back through a memory where, when you have a surgery, they stick a tube down your throat. It feels like you're gagging. And I went back through that memory, and as soon as I got through that memory, he wasn't choking me anymore. It wasn't gagging anymore. So, I mean, if I had just stayed with that, well, first of all, I wouldn't have had the point held because I would have ripped his hand out, but bit it off. But I wouldn't have been able to get through that memory and get to the bottom of that. So, as much as we say, you need to concentrate as a point holder and you need to do a good job, and if you're on the table, you need to tell your point holders what you want and what you need. Let's also, as Janine has shared, use those opportunities to look, well, maybe that is something with me. Let me check that out. Let me look at it.
There'll be plenty of times, for example, where you're pressing on a point and the person's asked you to back off, and you've backed off, and you've backed off, and you've backed off. And now Wendy Neal? Wendy? You had a point yesterday where you were barely touching it, right? Tell how much pressure you had in that point.
I was doing Tom's pineal and pituitary gland, and he was in a lot of pain, and I backed off where my fingers were deep in the toe, but the tips of my fingers were barely touching.
And what did it feel like to him?
It's giving him a lot of pain still, I believe.
So,
no, it was at the time.
So the thing to realize is, on the one hand, you honor and respect the feedback you're getting from the person on the table, and you do back off if it's more than they can lovingly and willingly endure. But there are situations where you know darn good and well that you're not pushing hard on the point anymore. There's situations where you are you're just barely touching the point, and yet the person feels like you're doing what?
That you're still well in there. But I remember last year John told me on a certain point it was David Lloyd, where he was in a lot of pain, and he said when he seems to settle down a bit to hone in again, which I was trying to do, Tom, but I was backing off too when you were asking me. But I thought this is the way it should be done.
The thing about it is this: you have to establish a relationship of trust between the point holder and the point holdee. Once that trust has been breached or lost, it's a very, very difficult thing to get back with that person again. It's not impossible, but it can be very, very difficult. So if I'm holding points on somebody and they've asked me to back off and back off and back off, I'll get to a certain point where I know all I'm doing is touching the point. There's no pressure to speak of. And I feel it's my responsibility to let the person know that. And I'll tell them, I'll say, okay, look, Tom, I'm just touching the point right now. If I have another finger free, I'll actually just touch that, I'll say, just like this. That's all I'm doing. I'm just resting my finger there. Now, hopefully, if you've worked in a cohesive way with that person, they'll believe you. They don't always, but hopefully they will. The thing is, if you know you're not doing it to them, you owe it to that person to really let them know and give them the opportunity to look within. How many of you have ever held a point on a person where this has happened, where you're barely touching it, and yet from the person's perspective, you got a hot knife and you're twisting it around in there? Okay? So you know what? A lot of you know what I'm talking about. So the thing is, Wendy couldn't have backed off anymore without unplugging. So she needed to do exactly what she did, which was to stay on the point and let Tom know what she was doing.
Yes, that's right. I couldn't have. I would have been right off it if I had have backed off any more.
Yeah.
I was just touching it, just tipping it.
And it's the same thing with the location on a spot. There are times when the person on the table will tell you you've slid and you're in the wrong spot, and they'll be absolutely correct. There are times when you will have slid. There are times when you really aren't on the points anymore, and you need to adjust it. But there will also be times where the person will be absolutely convinced that you're not on the right spot, and you really are. You really might be on the right spot. So the thing about it is you have to just go into it as a point holder from the perspective that you're, on the one hand, you're willing to be corrected, you're willing to be wrong, you're willing to acknowledge, hey, I really did slide on the point, or hey, I really am pushing too hard or not hard enough, and to take appropriate corrective measures. But on the other hand, also recognize that the way it seems to that person on the table is not always how it is. You might be absolutely spot on the point, and yet from the person's perspective, you're off in Cleveland somewhere. So you have to be firm sometimes and just say, look, I'm on the spot. This is where the point is. Because if you don't, you're probably actually losing the opportunity for the person to go through something. You know? I mean, if you shall we say, if you move off the spot when you're really on the right spot, you're really not you're keeping the peace, but are you doing that person a favor? Are you really helping that person? Because they've got an opportunity to look at something there. Linda?
Could I just ask something else? Well, in your opinion, did I do the right thing in moving back in again when he settled down? Because this could confuse people a little.
I think it's really important once you've backed off and the person, you need to say, how's that feel, and say, I'd like to add a bit more pressure, would that be okay? And to get that response from them, I think that's really important. And I think that's something we need to be continually doing with the point holding, is to just asking them, would it be okay if I added a bit more pressure? They'll tell you.
Don't wait for them to ask. Yep. Well, I guess I was judging it for myself.
Yeah.
Perhaps. I don't know how Tom felt about that.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep that element of trust, as Doug was saying, and to ask them, take the initiative and to ask them, would it be okay, and to make sure that you've just got them on that point of pain that they can endure. Because often when you're on the table, you know yourself, you go through the pain, and it's just so nice not to have it there that you don't say, oh, well, I'm not feeling anything. You just sort of lie and enjoy the fact that you don't have it. And so it's good if the point holder just keeps encouraging you to take a little more. It gets it over quicker too.
What do you do before you increase the pressure?
You always ask.
You ask them what?
Ask them, would it be okay if you gave them a bit more pressure?
Okay. Then how do you increase the pressure?
Gradually, yes. You just slowly increase it. Really slowly, and they'll soon say that's enough.
Are there going to be times when you're trying to be very gradual about it, but you're still going to end up going over the line on a person?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And also, it often gets more intense for them, and so they'll need to tell you then to back off as well.
Okay. Jane?
I was on a pineal point yesterday, which was hard to get any reaction from the person at all. And I pressed as hard as I could. My fingers were I was pressing really hard. And he was not happy with what I was doing, and he finally said, well, just forget it. So I felt like I was standing there holding a point for nothing all the time. But I stayed on what I was supposed to be on.
The thing about it is that patterns are going to come up, Jane, and some people are going to have a pattern of if it's not the way they want it, they're just going to say, oh, just forget it. Let's not bother. That's a pattern. Other people are going to have a pattern of feeling like they're not being appreciated and feeling like their own efforts have been wasted. So the thing about it is that there's opportunities there for everybody. It's like if one or both people are having their buttons pushed, then it's a chance to grow. It's a chance to learn something about yourself. Good on you. Corey?
You've got to remember that the point holding is only a mechanical process, so the pushing of the buttons and how emotional we get when we're holding points is a lot of the time more important anyway.
It's half the fun at least. Okay, how are we doing? Is everybody clear on the pineal? Do you want to go over that again? You all got it? Okay. Corey, would you describe how we find the hypothalamus?
The hypothalamus.
Hypothalamus.
Okay, if we grab the big toe here, and we go onto the side of the toe here, about in line with the bottom of the toenail, and just go straight in there.
Okay, which side of the toe?
The inside.
Towards the other toes?
Towards the other toes. So if you just take a line around from the bottom of the toenail, so it's around about that level there, straight on the side. Sometimes you might get a little bit more pain around to more about the front of the toe. So you just got to find the most painful point there.
You got you there, Tarek?
Oh no, it's burning now. I'll have to stay here for a couple of hours.
What gland will secrete hormones that will target the hypothalamus? Now, what gland will secrete hormones that target the hypothalamus? No, the pineal. The pineal will target the hypothalamus, which will then target the. So when you these three together are extremely important, because if any one of these is not working, that's pretty well your whole endocrine system that's going to be compromised. Because the pineal secretes hormones that target the hypothalamus, which then secretes hormones that target the pituitary. So if you've got problems in any one of these three, it's going to affect your entire endocrine system. So it's very, very important that you get these. And one thing I've noticed over the years is that the hypothalamus tends to be a pretty painful spot on most people, but it doesn't get held very often. It doesn't get held as much, and I think it's for the simple reason that it's not in the eye chart. I mean, that's my opinion anyways. I mean, the hypothalamus, for whatever reason, isn't in most of your iridology charts. So everybody gets the pineal, everybody gets the pituitary. I mean, probably all of you that have had your points held have had those held heaps of times, but the hypothalamus gets neglected a lot. It gets missed a lot. And I would really encourage you all to get that one taken care of. It's a good sore spot on most people. What does it tell us, Linda, if a point's sore?
That it needs a lot of work, and you need to get the pain out before you can actually go on to the next point.
Yeah. Donna? Sorry, Rick?
Is the hypothalamus that little dot between the pituitary and the pineal in the eye chart?
There are some people that will suggest that the hypothalamus may be found there, but there's others that place it at 12 o'clock, actually up outside of zone 3, and there's other people that place it in completely different places, but most people don't place it anywhere in the eye chart. So it's very confusing. And for this reason, I think, where most of us in the States and really a lot of other places are using the Jensen charts primarily, where the hypothalamus is not located, it just doesn't seem to be a priority for people. They don't tend to hold it as often. Not that it shouldn't be a priority, but just that it gets kind of neglected.
Can I ask a question about this just while I'm standing here? What is the MES just underneath the cecum?
It's like a lining of the. We'll get it. It's like a lining in the abdomen membrane.
I always think of the hypothalamus as the bridge between the two hemispheres of the brain. Is that correct?
I don't believe that's correct. You have a structure called the corpus callosum that would be the bridge in between the hemispheres. The hypothalamus is just a tiny little, it's a very, very small little thing that's located right in the same area as the pineal and the pituitary. Okay, anybody here have any trouble finding the hypothalamus? Okay, Neil? What's that? Okay, Linda or Corey, could you handle that?
The hypothalamus tends to be more on the side of the toe. When you're dealing with they are very close to each other. They're right next to each other, but you'll find a totally different spot there. Like if you're in between, you won't get pain. But you go right on the side. The pineal tends to be more pressing up to the head rather than straight out to the side. So you're pushing in that way. It is on the side of the toe, but the direction's different. Where you're pushing more towards the head, whereas the hypothalamus you're pushing more towards the side. Okay, so on this toe, it would be in there.
How do you like to hold the hypothalamus, Corey?
Well, depending on which side you're sitting, I like to just sit with the chair like that and hold it straight in there with the thumb.
That'll work. Linda?
Yes, I hold it in the same way. But if you're having a problem, just as Doug said earlier, just imagine that you're putting a ring on the end of the toe, and they're all in a line. The hypothalamus, the pituitary and pineal are all in a line there.
So, something else to consider on these spots, the points are, some of the points on the toe are fairly tiny, fairly precise spots. And one of the things I've seen a number of you do on some of these spots is try to hold them with a middle finger instead of with an index finger. And the thing about it is that on some points, I think the middle finger does work better, like STOs, for example, or thyroid in many cases. I think a lot of times the middle finger will work better because it tends to have you tend to have more strength in the middle finger. You tend to be able to get more pressure. But what's the downside of the middle finger compared to the pointer or the index finger? What's the downside? It's a bigger fingertip. Most of you, if you look at your fingertip on your middle finger and your index finger, usually the index finger tapers quite a bit more, and it's quite a bit smaller. So in some of these points where you have to get on them very, very precisely, the index finger may work a lot better than the middle finger will. There's not one right way or one wrong way to do it, but I'm just saying try some of these different things and recognize that you've got a trade-off. And again, if you compare a thumb to an index finger, you generally have quite a trade-off there because your thumb is probably going to be far stronger than your index finger, and yet it's probably also going to be quite a bit larger in terms of the points you're pressing with. So, I would suggest try it a number of ways and see how you get the most pain.
Again, when we're talking about using the thumb, it's not the whole pad of the thumb like pushed straight in there. You need to get the tip in. You need to just use the tip of your thumb in there so that you've got the hard part of your thumb.
If you're using your finger, you need to come on the other side and pull up. Like that. Did you get that? You actually need to sit on the other side of the foot, depending on whether you're using your finger or your thumb.
Okay, Wolf has brought up a point that bears mentioning. If you look around at different reflexology charts, what are you going to find? They all disagree with each other. You're going to find that the points will be located in slightly different places in different charts. I think on the one hand, what you're dealing with is anatomical variation. The one thing I would suggest is this. The chart that we'll be handing out, this is what John's found to work approximately for most people over many, many, many years as far as the location of the points. So I would strongly recommend you work with this chart and just don't be too rigid about it. Recognize you got a bit of variation possible. You got to play around with the angle, the location, and most likely if you stick pretty close to the chart, you're gonna be on the spot pretty good. Okay, how about the pituitary, Linda?
Well, the pituitary, it's right in the middle of the toe here. It's quite a big spot on the chart if you're using the foot chart. If you just come in and pull up, you usually get a pretty good response on that one. Sorry? Yes. No. A lot of these I find it's easier to stand.
Sometimes what I do in that spot, Linda, is I'll sit in the position you're in, like facing towards their feet.
Yep.
And I'll put a pillow or something kind of on top of their shin so I can kind of rest my, elbow there, and you get a real nice angle like that where your wrist is quite straight.
Because it takes a lot of pressure, because you have to support the toe, otherwise you pull the toe up. So you're pushing against the palm of your hand, really. Yeah.
Now, Corey?
And again, if you want to use your thumb, if you can't get the strength out of it, a lot of ladies need to use it. No, I tend to use my finger on this one. But again, you've got to get the direction right. It's sort of like, if you push straight in, sometimes you can't get it. Whereas you've got to go in and push up towards the top of the toe, like you're pushing towards the top of the head. When you think of the whole toe as indicating the whole head, then you're pushing towards the top.
What Corey has just mentioned, you really want to underscore that. You'll get pain, like if just get on the pituitary spot and just press straight in, like don't hook it all. Okay, just press straight in. Okay, now does that hurt, Tarek?
Slightly.
Okay, so you can get pain on the spot, but now just change the direction and get the hook with the same amount of pressure.
Very good.
Okay, how much did it multiply, the pain?
10 times?
Okay, 10 times as much pain, and he didn't change the location or the pressure at all. All he did was change the direction. One thing I have noticed on this spot is that a lot of people are too far towards the tip of the toe on this. We've been going around and we're finding a lot of people that are not low enough down in the toe. They're starting off too close to the tip of the toe on this. You really want to get right on the spot here. Just a couple of common sense things you might want to bear in mind here. When you're on a spot, of course, you're going to be on it for quite some time in most cases, at least a couple of hours. And I find that there's two things that you really want to try to stay away from if you can. I find that it's very, very hard to stay on a point if you have to put your hand into such a position that you got your wrist all bent around like that. So I find that very few people are going to be able to tolerate that sort of a hand position for 2 or 3 hours where you got an extreme bend in the wrist. And the other thing I think most of you will find very, very difficult is having your elbow up in the air, this sort of thing. A lot of people, I see them plug in like that, and 5-10 minutes later they're deeply regretting their the position they put themselves in. So it's definitely worthwhile to think ahead a bit here. Try to get into a position where you can do a very good job on the point without placing yourself into a ridiculous position of having your wrist totally hooked around or your elbow sticking up in the air or both. And there's just certain points, like Linda said, there's certain points you're going to have to stand on because you're not going to be able to do a good job on them, sitting. Shall we? What's next in our sheet? Anybody remember? Okay, what's the relationship of the medulla? We're more or less looking at endocrine glands here. So how does the medulla tie in here? Lewis? Okay, Lewis says the medulla governs all the involuntary stuff. Anybody agree with that? Okay, the medulla will in particular have a lot to do with the breathing and the heart rate. Is it an endocrine gland? Is it? Okay, does the medulla secrete hormones? Does it? If it may. I've never heard of it doing that. It may well. I mean, they find out new things all the time, but to the best of my knowledge, it's not actually an endocrine gland. But what is its relationship to the pituitary? It has a certain amount of control over the pituitary, and they're very much tied in neurologically, the medulla and the pituitary. So this is why we have it so high up the order of priorities there. Okay, let's see. I guess your turn, Corey. Where's the medulla here? Thank you, Lewis. The medulla is tied in neurologically with the pituitary. So you could say to some extent that it has a lot of control over the pituitary. Again, it's one that it gets held a fair amount on people, but I do think it tends to get neglected a bit. I think people tend to race ahead and go like pituitary thyroid or pineal thyroid, and a lot of times the medulla and the hypothalamus get kind of neglected there. So let's make sure we get it. It's a sore point on practically everybody. Corey?
It is a sore point on most people, and also what I find is you get a lot of electricity and pain out of it. So it's a good point to put people like Tom on. to give him some hell, Tom Stacer.
It's kind of one of those Scandinavian points, huh?
Yeah. You just grab the inside edge down underneath, sort of on the underside of the toe there. And again, it's in the same, you'll have the similar angle to the pineal, where you're going more up towards the body, but you're pushing in there towards the, sort of like on an angle.
It's down at the base of the big toe, and it's towards it's towards your other toes, but it's definitely on the big toe. It's not in the webbing. It's definitely on the big toe, and it's on the bottom or the side. Is it on the bottom of the big toe or the side of the big toe? Okay, it's up on the side. The exact spot can vary quite a bit. How much can it vary in your experience, Corey?
Quite a lot. Sometimes the pain tends to be right down lower. You can press on the actual toe part and you don't get a lot of pain there. But if you go just down a little bit more where you'll be able to feel the joint, and just above the joint there, if you dig in there with the tip of your finger, you'll actually get quite a lot of pain out of there and a lot of electricity.
If you look at the sort of little arc that would go along the side of the toe from the bottom of the toe towards the top of the toe, you can have a certain degree of variation along that, because some people the medulla will be more towards the bottom, and some people it'll be more towards the top of the toe. You'll get a lot of variation there. And how about variation on the angle?
Tremendous variation on the angle. Most people I've found so far, it tends to be the same angle. You just push straight on a diagonal. You're not going straight up to the head, and you're not going straight across like the hypothalamus. You're going on an angle in that way with your thumb, and it's quite easy to just grab the whole foot like that and hold it.
Yeah. So play around with it
But just play around with it, because you might need to sort of move around like that to get it, or move around to the side a bit.
Linda?
I don't know that there's a great deal more to say. I thought that I remember John saying that it did release hormones that affected the pituitary.
It may. I'm not aware of it, but it may.
Yeah, I don't know what they are, but I do remember he said that it's sometimes very beneficial to hold that with the pituitary. Do you?
Because it's very tied in with the pituitary.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm. Is anybody here aware of the medulla releasing hormones? Okay, it may. I mean, they didn't used to think the heart did, and it does, so it's certainly possible. Okay, what's next in our chain of command? Okay, we're going to go down to the thyroid. Linda?
I'll work on this foot, because the thyroid's in here, up on this metatarsal here of the first of your big toe, just coming in up there. Is that it? No. Which way? This way? Lateral.
If you look on your foot chart, those of you that have the foot chart, the thyroid
I'm
is...
not sure which way you're telling me. That way.
The thyroid can be located all along a pretty big arc there. So there's a lot of possible spots for the thyroid.
I think that might be it.
Yeah, you'll find the thyroid point all around the whole ball of the foot, right around that bone. So quite often you can get your whole hand in there, if you like, and all the fingers, and go around that ball and just press in and get some pain out of it that way. But also, if you actually go right at the base there and you press upwards towards the ball of the foot, like that, and you hold the top as well in a C-clamp. So
this is the most painful till now.
So what I found, if you actually hold a C-clamp there, as in you're holding the top of the foot there, right where the joint is, as well as the bottom in a C-clamp, they'll get a lot of pain out of that point, and quite often a lot of burning will come out of the top.
Okay, you'll find on this point that a lot of people will hold it with a thumb as Corey's doing it. Show them also this hand position coming around. Linda, use your right hand on that left foot. The right hand on his left foot, like that. Yeah. For the thyroid there. Yeah. Okay, now you got to really hook way around into it like that, so you get back into the ball of the foot.
I experienced that Corey's grip is much and much more painful than Linda's.
That was the other position, the first position that he had, yes, which was like this one. I don't know that I'd be able to, Corey's using his index finger, I don't know that I'd be able to have enough strength to do that. I'd probably have to use my third finger to get that same amount of strength, and it's really just a matter of finding the position, and it's working with whoever's on the table to do that.
Okay, how many of you here have bunions?
Yes. Bunions, you notice they're right near the thyroid point. They reflex to the thyroid, and they have to do with suppressed, usually genetic memory. You'll find they run in families, it passed down. Okay, but who has some nice bunions they'd like to show the class? Come on, Wendy. Wendy, since you have nice buns, but show us your nice bunions now.